Okay, we've gone live. Uh, well, sort of an impromptu, random timing for a live stream, but I won't have time this evening, so I thought I'd do one now. I was going to do a video on the NFL games in London, and we can put that in a live stream. And I was going to do a video on the Major League Baseball games in London next year, but we're going to put that in the live stream as well. It's come out like late last night, early this morning about the cost of the seating arrangements and reconfiguring the London City Stadium for the Major League Baseball, which will have a knock-on effect for the cost of tickets, not just for West Ham fans for the whole of that season, but for Athletics fans and obviously Major League Baseball fans, because it's going to cost anywhere between 11 and 15 million pounds to reconfigure the seating at the London City Stadium. And Karen Brady, the West Ham chairwoman, who's not my favourite cup of tea, but in this case, I have sympathy for West Ham and the agreement that they signed with the London City Stadium owners in order to have a place to play their home games. It appears that the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who's not a very popular figure, is making this whole thing more political than it needs to be. He was very, very keen to get Major League Baseball in there. He's also been seen at the NFL games this season. He was definitely there at the weekend in the Jacksonville Jaguars game, which they lost. But he's been seen at a lot of these events, rubbing shoulders with league commissioners and like Roger Goodell. He's turning these sporting events into more political events than they need to be. He's trying to get political capital out of it, something that I'm not very keen on, and I'm not very keen on him as a politician and the party he stands for. But it's a worrying thing because West Ham have obviously signed this agreement to rent the stadium for a period of time. They've got a decent deal out of it. Fans aren't necessarily happy with the West Ham stadium situation. I understand that there were protests last season. I did videos on the fact that fans were protesting on the pitch invasions. And, the Major League Baseball thing, that's going to affect the ticket price. Long story short, it's going to affect the ticket price. It's going to be a major reconfiguration of the stadium for the two games between the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. Now, if you are a fan of baseball, fine, you want to go, but that's going to raise the price of your ticket. Whereas at Wembley, they don't have to reconfigure the seats. They just tape off the sections that are needed by both sides for their benches, and you don't have to reconfigure seats. Same with Twickenham when they hosted games there, no seat reconfiguration. Hence why Tottenham are having a slightly different stadium rebuild where the pitch can be adjusted for the seating. So again, less seating configuration changes when their stadium opens. But the London City Stadium was originally set up for athletics, so there's retractable seating, and they have to take a section out of the retractable seating via crane, and it's expensive just for two games. The sheer expense, I think, outweighs the amount of ticket revenue they'll make. So it is going to affect ticket prices. On the Major League, on the NFL games in London, yes, I do enjoy watching the international series, but the fact that Jacksonville are getting so much favourable, games in the sense that they're getting a lot of games in London, I don't think it's fair on the other teams and the other fan bases. The plan was, I think, ultimately by Sadiq Khan to move them their part of the season or for the whole season. Now that he hasn't bought Wembley, hopefully the rest of the NFL says, hey, we want to be a bigger share of this London pie. We also want to have games here. The issue with the NFL games in London is travel. So look at the Oakland Raiders. They didn't arrive in London until late Friday night. They've got to come from the West Coast. They basically got half a day really to acclimatise, and then they had to play a game. So this is what rings as not having a franchise in London. This is the bells ringing saying we can't have a franchise in London by the NFL because of the travel and logistics. They even had a former Jacksonville Jaguars player in the studio for the BBC, and he was like, yeah, the sheer logistics of getting teams over to London would nullify any idea of having a permanent footing in London with the team. Again, ticket prices have been questioned. Should they be as high as they are? I understand it was the best ever crowds they've ever had, especially for the third game. That was the Philadelphia Eagles, Jacksonville Jaguars. That was a sellout, partly because you've got the Super Bowl champions, and partly I think Jacksonville have been very, very lucky. And I think they've been favoured in the London series over recent years to have so many games there. They've had more games than any other team. Partly because their owner clearly wanted to buy Wembley. That hasn't happened. I think Roger Goodell and the NFL will have to look at this and say, are other teams happy with the fact that Jacksonville are getting so many games in London? I think they should personally rotate it through every single team in the NFL. So every single team at least has a few games in the London series, and gets to taste being either the home or away team. It doesn't matter, but gets to actually experience the London experience. I'd also would like to see the NFL take more games outside of London in the UK. There are plenty of stadiums that could have NFL matches. And I think that would actually help grow the sport in the UK more. I think there is a lot of resentment towards the fact that London gets a lot of international football, rugby league as well, the grand final of the Challenge Cup. There's a lot of resentment there. Playoff finals in football, and British sports fans would rather see some of these finals taken outside of London. Now, the Super League grand final with the rugby league is hosted at Old Trafford. Whether that's the right call is debatable, but as considering that most of the teams in the Super League are from the north of England, it makes logical sense to have your biggest showpiece event in the biggest stadium in the north of England. But then the Challenge Cup is in Wembley. This is where fans are somewhat not happy with the favouring of London for major sports events in the UK. Manchester also gets its fair share, I have to admit. Manchester does. But there is a resentment of the fact that, you have so many national stadiums in London, like Twickenham for rugby, Wembley for football, and for a certain extent rugby league on certain games. Cricket, you've got Lords and the Oval, so you've got two international venues for cricket. That there is certain resentment now from sport fans outside of the M25 circular or the southeast. Even for me, a fan from the southeast, going into London is actually exceptionally expensive and time consuming. So even though I live pretty close to London, it ain't necessarily easier to get to. Sometimes I actually find it easier to go to the West Country or the South Coast quicker than getting into London. That is the issue with the transportation infrastructure. But that's another thing. So if the NFL was to take games, let's say to St James's Park, which is a perfect size stadium for an NFL game, big stadium, maybe Old Trafford, maybe Anfield, I think possibly the Ricoh Arena at Coventry. It's a bit smaller, but it's a good size stadium. You may see further growth in the NFL for a British-based team. You may see more support for it because at the moment, again, a lot of fans are feeling that they're either priced out or the location is so difficult to get to. Because Wembley's in a terrible, shocking position. Wembley's in a shocking location in northwest London. The infrastructure wasn't improved when they rebuilt the stadium. They could have spent a lot more in improving the infrastructure. They haven't. They've kept Wembley Way exactly pretty much the same as it was at the old Wembley. The stadium is bigger than the old Wembley. So, yeah, they haven't really done enough with the infrastructure around Wembley to warrant having an NFL franchise there permanently. It's bad enough trying to get to football games at Wembley or even to the North Circular in general, just travelling around that part of North London. The infrastructure is shockingly poor. And so, yeah, that's, I think, another thing that's holding the NFL possibly having a permanent presence here with a team back. Okay, with the Premier League table, I think Liverpool are your best bet. I think Chelsea, outside chance. And I think there are a few other teams in there that could surprise for the European places. Tottenham, their lack of signings is starting to harm them now. They didn't make any signings in the summer. And, their stadium issue is another issue that's I think holding them back. And we've been mentioning Wembley, which we've just mentioned here. That pitch is in a really sorry state. I think last night, it's not the worst pitch I've ever seen. I remember the Premier League used to play with far worse pitches than that, and the Championship, and what is now League One and League Two. The pitch conditions used to be a lot worse than that 10, 15 years ago. I think football has gone a bit on the soft side with their obsession for the perfect pitch. But considering that some lower league grounds are in a better state than that, that is a pretty shocking state of affairs for the pitch. That was 3 NFL games have done that, and also a lot of football, more football than I think Wembley, that turf, is used to. They've had to relay it before. It wasn't even in the worst state before that. It's not a good pitch. Let's just say that. For the amount of money that stadium cost to build, the pitch is shocking. If you look at it, Bournemouth and Watford are above Man United as well. So they're in a run to possibly nick a European place. They're only just behind Tottenham. So Tottenham aren't secure in fifth. The fact that Arsenal and Chelsea and Liverpool, Man City are above them, I think I am surprised Mourinho has lasted as long with some of the negative headlines. But again, the press seems to have this fascination with riling him and vice versa. He doesn't have a good working relationship with the media. This is known. The media are playing on that. But there is clearly parallels with his time at Chelsea, his second time at Chelsea, and also Conte at Chelsea as well. So it seems that there is a toxic environment there. I don't think he's fully got the squad going in the same direction. I don't think he's necessarily the right manager to bring out the best certain members of the squad, such as Pogba or Martial. I think they're being constrained and shackled by his more defensive tactics. Pogba cannot defend. We know this. Play to his strengths. You'll get a more effective player out of him. Force him to do stuff that he's just hopeless at. It isn't going to work. But yes, the Glazer family, there's rumours that they might want to sell. I think the team have got worse under Mourinho. His first season, he comes in, they win a trophy. Yeah, it's the Europa League, but they win a trophy. They qualify for the Champions League. Last year, yes, they were a lot of points behind City, but they were second, comfortably second. This year, not happening. Marc Marquez, Valentino Rossi. Marquez is only one with Hondas, though. Rossi's one on several manufacturers. There's one difference. I think the rule changes have helped Marquez as well, because the change in what the field is with manufacturers and horsepower restrictions and all that. And another thing, no one seems to watch it. You know why? It's on BT Sport, because BT Sport got the rights to it, which I think was a big mistake, massive mistake to do that. Less people are now involved with MotoGP, and less people care about MotoGP now than they did 10 years ago, I think. Channel 5 initially had the MotoGP rights. That was brilliant. It went to BBC. It got less brilliant. And then they finally, BBC, for whatever reason, because we all pay license fees apparently, decided to shrink their sports coverage and get rid of red button channels and get rid of BBC Three. And I think that's, for me, it's going to go the same way as the World Superbikes: less coverage, less visibility. We used to have the World Superbikes on Channel 5. We used to have MotoGP on Channel 5. We used to have these events, these big sporting events live. And now they've been taken away for us by this subscription TV service, which is crap. I think Valentino Rossi, yes, they're both brilliant riders. I think Rossi was more consistent in his prime, where I don't think he had a DNF for a long period of time. But the title of greatest of all time is completely subjective. There will never be another one like John Surtees, who won both Grand Prix in car and bike. You're not going to see that again. I think there are eras of riders, and because the sport has evolved, I never use the title of greatest of all time. Really, it's a subjective view on things. But Marc Marquez, is it because the regulations favour Honda? Is it because Honda have the biggest budget? Rossi won most of his titles actually with Yamaha, but he won in some of his early titles again with Honda. Honda have won the most titles. Again, it's subjective. If Marquez was to go to another manufacturer or another team, would he be as successful? It's like Lewis Hamilton in F1 with the fact that there's very few competitive cars. Yes, bikes is a little bit more dicey, where even the best riders fly off. I've seen Marquez go down on nearly ripping off his face in one of his early seasons, almost took off his chin. So it is subjective. One accident could kill you. But Rossi's nearing the end of his career now anyway. The quality level of the field has changed. The amount of younger riders now in the field has changed. I think the sport is at a crossroads. Real Madrid, Lopetegui's been sacked for the second time this year. He got sacked from the Spain job and he's got sacked from the Real Madrid job. Basically, what is it? What's that saying? No one's unsackable? Yeah, that's the one. No one is unsackable. Real Madrid The politics in Spanish football right now is toxic, and there is a lot going on behind the scenes with this Spanish football. The regions of Spain are getting very political. This La Liga move to play games in the US is getting very political. It's Spanish football's got itself in a really toxic mix right now. Real Madrid they just demand wins, but I don't think they fully prepared for Zidane's departure. They had no backup plan. They win the Champions League, and they go, "Oh, by the way, guys, I'm leaving. I'm just gonna go." They had no backup plan for that. They weren't even considering it. They demand success. It's only so long that Barcelona and Real Madrid with the current squads they have can win. I think Atletico are really starting to cause them a lot of problems as well. Again, Real Madrid, the board will not like this. The president will not like this. The fact that the working class club in Atletico are now doing better than them, they don't like that. It's a class thing as well, which is stupid. And the fact that teams like Bilbao still produce good young Basque talent, they don't like that. Again, the regionalism. Things are going. It's all nasty regional politics with Spanish football. It's Spanish football is actually quite toxic as an atmosphere. I think Spain's time as the best team in the world has gone with what's happening off the field with clubs and this La Liga move and the fact they just had a good 10-year spell. Apart from that, they could never win anything in international football. They really couldn't. Club football, yes. International football is a toxic environment. And that's continuing with the divisions in Barcelona between Espanyol and Barcelona itself, the divisions in Madrid between Atletico and Real, and divisions in the other provinces of Spain. It's going to become a very toxic environment. I've got something in my bloody eye. And I think that's going to hinder and damage Spanish football again. We're going to go back to the 80s when Spain were just hopeless at international tournaments, and the 90s where they had all these talented players. Because Guardiola never won an international title. Never. So when people say Messi's the greatest player of all time, he plays Spanish club football. And then he goes to the international arena, and because of all the divisions in club football, yes, he's Argentinian. He doesn't win a thing. The boxing on Channel 5, yes, boxing. Channel 5 do get the occasional live boxing, I think once every couple of months. I find it funny that ITV come up with ITV Box Office because that's going to get them viewers. Channel 5 have got it right. I think they don't do boxing all the time, but when they do it, they get it right. It's free to air. There's none of this box office crap. Yes, they're lesser fighters or fighters coming through, so you get to see the future world champions or the future regional champions of their weight division come through, which is great to see. ITV, I don't like their boxing coverage where it's going from free to air on Channel 5. You go to ITV, you got to pay box office prices. Hang on a second, you're a free to air network. I'm not doing that. And they wonder why people find a VPN to stream it without paying. The boxing pay-per-view is how it's done. I think I didn't catch it, unfortunately. I was out, but I was out at the time that the Leicester City helicopter crash happened, and I'm going to cover that briefly. I haven't done a video on the Leicester City helicopter crash. I don't think it's appropriate. A friend of mine did do a couple of live streams, literally, as it was happening, because he'd obviously watched the game, done a live stream for the game, because he's a football YouTuber. And then obviously it happened in the aftermath, and he just happened to be doing live stream. Then he did 3 live streams. And basically it was a helicopter accident. 5 people have died, including the Leicester City owner. We don't know anything else than that. Crash team investigators. And this is where I'm going to leave it as this. When it comes to an air traffic incident, such as an accident like this, crash, because an accident proves no one's at fault. The air crash investigation teams, they can take years sometimes to piece bits together. They can go from weeks, months to even years. Until their full report is released and we know the full ins and outs of what happened, it is wrong to speculate. And some of the comments online are absolutely disgusting. Another reason why I didn't want to do a video on it, because comments have been placed on Twitter, on other YouTubers, on websites, which are pretty vile, considering that 5 people lost their lives. And so all we know is it's crashed. Had it taken off, let's say, half hour, 45 minutes earlier, a lot more people would have been killed. I think there are going to be rule changes over the use of helicopters by sports teams at stadiums. Of this, I have no doubt. There will be a recommendation, most likely done, saying that we cannot have another near, like, that could have been a far, far worse incident than it was. Of course, the police teams and the fire crews and the ambulance crews were still there from the game. They were on their wind down. They were doing their match review. It comes down, hence why it took only 2 minutes for all the emergency services to be there, because they were all still in the vicinity of the stadium having their post-match meetings. They were able to do their thing. Again, honestly, it's something that is very difficult to talk about, because on my end of things, it's happened, yes, but it'd be wrong to speculate the causes of things. And there's people saying that, this guy had a lawsuit in Thailand, and was he bumped off by the organised criminals in the Southeast Asian whatever. I mean, people are saying that. For me, it's happened. We have to wait until the crash team investigation team and the police do their investigations, and they come out with what's happened or what they believe has happened and occurred. The helicopter will have black boxes on it. It will have flight data recorders. They can have a look at what's caused this. Has there been a power surge, power cutting out, engine failure, rotor failure, anything like that, pilot error, and then we can find out what's gone on. Because helicopters are inherently more dangerous than planes. They are actually more dangerous than your regular plane kind of aircraft, because they have rotor blades in the tail and up on the top. So they are actually more unstable and actually more dangerous than a standard aircraft. On that, that's what I'm going to say on it. It was lucky that it was so much. The time after the game was over an hour, so most fans were out the vicinity of the stadium. It was mostly the stadium staff that was still there, and the security services still there. But I think that's a bit of luck behind that. The Cricket World Cup now. Obviously, there's going to be a clash with the Cricket World Cup with the Major League Baseball games in London. I think there's a lot going on in cricket, which is unfortunately distracting away from what could be a great World Cup next year. The TV rights is a big talking point over this World Cup. The fact it's not on free-to-air TV. But it is in the UK, and India proved this summer that they did struggle in English conditions badly. So I wouldn't put India down to win this tournament. Pakistan played reasonably well against Ireland and England in the early part of the summer, so Pakistan have a chance. I can see the South Africans having a good shot, and maybe New Zealand. New Zealand could be a real dark horse with how they're playing right now. I think it's very more open to, it could be any number of teams. Always watch out for the West Indies as well. They always have strong teams in the shorter format of the game. Bangladesh could be a dark horse. But I think with what's going on in cricket, these corruption scandals right now, I think that is taking the shine off the sport. Al Jazeera keep releasing these allegations on their TV documentaries. They've released their second part. There could be even further to come. For some reason, they don't mention the players that they're accusing of doing this in their documentary, but the media do have the names in their possession. It's interesting. It's a very open-ended tournament. Invicta and Milton Keynes. I think Milton Keynes possibly. I think Invicta will, yes. And Milton Keynes, they survived last year. They were competitive last year. The issue more is actually about Milton Keynes Lightning in the Elite League. They're having issues putting out a full match night roster every night. I think they were down to 13 skaters and 2 goalies the other night. So they were a whole defence pairing and line down of forwards. So they're playing short benched. I think the Thunder will stick around. I think Invicta will stick around. They were always in the Division 1 of the National League before the restructuring last season. I think they will still be there next year. I think Cardiff Fire are meant to be coming back up next year as well. There's an agreement there where they've taken a year out. So that's all up in the air. obviously, it all depends on what happens with Basingstoke, because obviously on Sunday I was at the Bracknell Bees Basingstoke Bison game, and I got talking to some Basingstoke fans. They have a meeting coming up this week about the future of their team and where they're going to play their games and if they're going to complete the season. It all depends on Basingstoke. If Basingstoke are not here next year, then Cardiff are definitely coming back up, and we may see another team added just to bolster it. Or the Guildford Flames or Milton Keynes Lightning may go, we can't cope in the Elite League, we're coming back down, because Milton Keynes are definitely struggling in the league above. But that's all for another discussion, isn't it? I think Invicta and Milton Keynes, they will still be here next year. They will be, because we'll have to see. But again, Hull apparently into the Elite League again. They were put on a deferment after Murrayfield failed to get their team in. It's again uncertain. They got the biggest rink in the national divisions. They have had an Elite League team before. I think the fact that Guildford and Milton Keynes were added, I think they should look further south possibly. But Hull would be a really good matchup with Sheffield. Again, I think they're going to add Peterborough and Bracknell before too long. I think they have to, just to balance out a team in the Midlands and the team in the south of the UK. And it keeps it a nice, even league then. But it all depends on Milton Keynes, if they can keep going. If Milton Keynes struggle, then it's going to become a more unstable league, which it hasn't been in recent years. It's been growing really well, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if Hull move up, then that's going to affect the balancing of how the division structures work in the national level. Would that mean that Telford move to the south? Does that mean Peterborough move to the north division? I mean, it completely then screws the balancing. So with the former EPIHL teams, if Manchester was still going, we wouldn't have this discussion about is Hull or Peterborough or Bracknell or whatever team from the EPIHL moving up. We wouldn't have this discussion because we would still have a reasonably strong level of competition at the second tier that's semi-pro, maybe professional, depending on import rules and budgets. So again, apparently, until a statement is released by the team or the league saying this is happening, this is the process that we have, they normally give 2 to 3 years before a team comes up. They have to meet certain criteria. If they say in 2 years' time they're going up, fine, we have a time scale. That's what they did with Milton Keynes. That's what they did with Guildford. The fact that they weren't as public as they could have been on in statements was a bit of a problem. But again, they took a long period of time to assess them and make sure they were ready to compete. It's proving that Milton Keynes probably overreached themselves. I don't know how long Guildford can also stay in the Elite League as well without a local rival, because if Milton Keynes fall out, then who's their rivalry game going to be with? They're going to be isolated in the southeast. That's where I think Bracknell and Peterborough being added would help. But again, it comes down to money and it comes down to budgeting. No, I don't really cover the sailing unless we're talking about the Olympics, and even then we're not in the right part of the Olympic cycle. Have I been sailing? Yes, I did it at school for a brief period. I tended to get hit in the head with the boom a lot. Sailing, I gave it a go. Wasn't the best at it. But again, sailing doesn't get necessarily the coverage that it could. But at the same time, how many people are actually going to be interested in sailing? That's again one of the reasons why sailing probably doesn't get the coverage. Is it how many people are actually going to watch a sailing tournament or a team tournament or something like that? But again, it is in the news. It is occasionally snippeted on broadcast in the news, and it does get decent coverage when the Olympics comes around, but it doesn't get enough coverage apart from the America's Cup, which happens yearly. Okay, let's have a look at some of these questions. Hull were put on a deferment. It was to do with the rink condition. That's probably one of the reasons why Bracknell possibly will be held back as well. Looking at the shambles that was Sunday night getting into the rink, um, that I think from what I know of Hull's rink, it's about the same age. It's about 30 years old. They have had a team in the Elite League before though, and that had issues staying afloat. So again, um, you know, it's a difficult one. They want to plan to, but the Elite League put them on a deferment for a year or two. And if they feel that it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Bear in mind, this whole team have only been going since 2015, I believe. So they haven't been going around long. They haven't had time really to establish themselves as long as other teams have with a fan base and structures in place. So that could be interesting. But if they go up, then it's going to have to be a complete re-looking at the National League structure, and would the EPIHL in some format come back? Possibly. Also, yes, they would need to completely look at basically rejigging the format. Promotion relegation is now gone. In future years, that will go. And I think the national North and South may be rejigged to some kind of EPIHL level with some of the better NIHL teams that have better financing, such as the London Raiders, for example, or the Romford Raiders, if you call them again, sort of getting back in and being brought up to a second tier level. They're going to have to do it that way. I think that's the way it's going to end up being. Travel costs will have to be taken in consideration. The import rule will have to be looked at because we're currently at 2 with a third. You are allowed a third to rotate. You can only have 2 on a match night. So that's going to be looked at. I can see them going back to an EPIHL structure with teams deciding to form a level below. I think that's the only way that it's going to work if Hull go up. And if Milton Keynes Lightning decide to falter in the Elite League and they come back down, then that will lead to a lot more rejigging because the Thunder have 2 teams there. So that's going to completely change the structures and completely change what's happening because the Cardiff Fire have said from next season they're going to plan to come back into Division 1 South. They're going to try and get a team and I believe the league are on board with that. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a very complex summer again. But I can see the league structure changing again. And this is, I think, something that the sport doesn't need. It needs consistency for a couple of years, not this constant chopping and changing, because it leaves it every off-season. What's going to happen? Are these teams going to be going long-term? Because we've seen with Swindon, Bracknell and Peterborough, they are clearly very stable. Basingstoke, we don't have a clue about. They don't look like they're going to last much longer. Does that mean that Basingstoke team merges with Slough, for example? There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of uncertainty, which is something the sport doesn't need right now. The sport needs certainty. With the growth it's seen over the last couple of years, it needs certainty. It doesn't need this uncertainty, both in the Elite League with what teams are going to be in it next year, and in the National League again, what teams are going to be where next year. It does need some consistency and certainty. Otherwise, the sport itself will hit a roadblock, and it may harm development going forward of young players such as a Liam Kirk as an example, or a Ben O'Connor as an example. Who Ben O'Connor's obviously coming back to Sheffield, but Liam Kirk now playing abroad, that's a positive sign that British ice hockey can develop this talent, and it can go through the NHL draft, or it can play in Sweden. So that is the concern, that it will hinder development of these young players. We have a lot of good young players waiting to take that next step. We've seen it with the youth level World Championships, where we got a gold medal at age group a couple of years ago. And a couple of Bracknell players were involved in that. A couple of Swindon players were involved in that. This is back in the EPIHL days. So we've seen there is the right amount of development, and there's a good talent pool there. It just needs that stability, extra funding, and I think then we have a chance of having more players get into the NHL, and if not the NHL, the AHL draft, and playing in the ECHL, and going to North America or going to Europe, and then getting possibly signed as a free agent or as an undrafted free agent, there is that chance that British players can play outside of Britain in some of the European leagues, in North American minor leagues, and then end up in the NHL or in the NHL system, like Liam Kirk. You need stability to do that. I think the Wildcats probably won't because of the layout of the rink at Swindon. It's big enough. It's just the layout. I think Peterborough and Bracknell are the most likely in future years because the Bees have been we've been approached before in 2005 when the British National League was still going. So the approach has been made to Bracknell before in the early days of the Elite League. They have been approached before. Peterborough, I think, have got the stability and the longevity, and I think if they were to go up, I think it would make logical sense with Guildford where they are that Bracknell go up, because it then balances out where teams are in the league. Obviously, there's 3 Scottish sides and a team in Wales and a team in Northern Ireland, but Bracknell have proven they don't mind travelling to Cardiff. They did it in the Super League days. They did it obviously last season when the Cardiff Fire were playing. So that kind of travel isn't a problem. I think it's more down to the financing and getting a team together. The fact that 3 or 4 Bracknell players have been on 2-way contracts this season with the Elite League, and the fact that Tetlow last season was on a 2-way contract with the Elite League means that we can develop players from the youth system to get into the main team to then go up. So I think we could definitely get players together to form a team. It's all about the imports, I think. For us, Peterborough, I think exactly the same. They've had players on 2-way contracts with the Elite League that have gone up. So again, they've proven they can develop through the youth system. So I think as clubs, they are in a good place. I think it's more the money side of it, and rink upgrades are necessary for both teams. I think Swindon, it is the rink, the layout of it. That is the only thing I think that's wrong with it. And that looked really crap for TV. Having all the fans on one side where the TV cameras are and no fans on the other side, it's not a great way if you want to try and sell the league to international viewers, I suppose, and sell TV rights if you've got the main stand not being shown on camera with being packed, because I think that would look bad. But I think with the Basingstoke struggles, I think Basingstoke fans will end up being following Bracknell. I think I don't know if they can get another balcony or another bit of seating on the far side. I really don't. I think that wall's too close. I think you would have to knock the wall back a bit and change the layout of the building. Again, we have to see what happens with Hull. We have to see what happens with the Milton Keynes Lightning. We have to see if it stays as an odd-numbered league, that's going to be a problem. I think the Elite League would rather Milton Keynes Lightning stayed in, because if they go out, then Guildford loses their nearest geographical rival, even though Bracknell is the nearest main term rival. Geographically, I think that's one of the reasons why you would want to have that kind of rivalry, because that will sell tickets. World fencing, no, there isn't, and this has been a debating point when it comes to Olympic funding, not just here in the UK but around the world. Fencing funding is slowly being eroded, but it was always seen as an elitist sport anyway. To be a fencing club member, you had to have a bit of that. So yeah, world fencing, it never really got much coverage anyway. In my eyes, I never saw much coverage when I've been trolling the internet or looking for topics to discuss or doing history. I haven't found enough fencing competition material. And that's a problem that World Fencing as an organisation needs to go, why are we not getting our sport ball coverage? Why are we not trying to get the sponsors on board? Because there are people out there who aren't necessarily from a well-off background who want to take up fencing, who are actually quite gifted at it, but are put off because of the elitist style of the sport or the funding side of the sport. It's the same with shooting as well. It has come up for hot debate because the UK has had some good fencing medalists over the years. They're not necessarily household names, but we have won medals at the Olympics in fencing, and Olympic funding has been cut out. And that is a big debate that has been had over the last... Since 2012, the level of Olympic funding, we had a very, very good Olympics here in 2012, built upon 2008. went to Rio in 2016 and again carried on the momentum of winning a lot of medals. So those 3 Olympic Games in the summer, plus the Winter Olympics we've had as well, a lot of medals been won by the UK. Olympic funding has come into the massive spotlight, and I think, that extra spotlight on every time there's a spending review when it comes to Olympic funding. But fencing has lost out amongst the sports that have lost out since 2012. And we'll have to see what happens long term with fencing. But there is a funding issue, not just here in the UK, but around the world with it. It is seen as an elitist sport. And that is another problem that they as a sport, need to tackle. And trying to get people from more diverse backgrounds competing in it. That is something we need to look at. But that's part of the problem with TV rights. The EPL, yes, it does need to come back, but with Guildford and the Milton Keynes Lightning and now Hull going up to the Elite League, that means another 3 of the teams that were in the EPIHL have gone, which would mean not many teams left. Because it was a 10-team league, it then went to 9 with the collapse of Manchester. It then went to 7 with 2 teams going up. It will then be a 6-team league. You can't have a 6-team league. No. And Basingstoke looking like they're going to go the way. There'll be 5 teams left from the EPIHL days. You cannot form a league with 5 teams. You're going to have to flesh it out to at least 8 teams to really have a decent league that's competitive enough. You would have to look at, Streatham, possibly Billingham and Blackburn, but you've got to try and keep the travel costs down. The Sheffield Steel Dogs, have them back in a heartbeat. Don't like them, but I'll have them back because they had a bit of goonery, which I kind of like. Telford. Telford's rink is what's holding them back as a team overall. Their rink is tiny. It only seats less than 1,000 people. That is the problem with Telford, is the size of their rink. All the other rinks seat over 1,000 to 3,000, sometimes 4,000 people. And we have to look at the state of the sport. Would another EPL level, would it work? And what would be what would be the import rule? What would be the, budget approximation? What would be the ticket price? But all these kind of things. Coventry Blaze. Well, 3 of the Bracknell Bees players have been on 2-way contracts this season with the Coventry Blaze. So in that sense, they're doing better than Milton Keynes. They can actually ice a team. I think the most likely team to come down would be Milton Keynes Lightning. If Coventry Blaze came with them, then we could discuss having an EPIHL back, because I think we'd have enough teams with enough money to be able to ice a team with more imports or at a higher level of salary. So the better players want to play in the second tier. But again, the Elite League wants to avoid this. They've expanded. They want to grow the sport. If Coventry go out, that will be a big blow to the Elite League going forward. It would be a massive blow. And I don't think it's something that the Elite League could afford, losing another team. They've lost the Edinburgh Capitals. I think that was, a really badly handled situation. The Steelers, I don't feel sorry for them, because the guy who owns the Steelers is the guy who owns the Elite League. So they've had a lot of favourable treatment when it comes to the Department of Player Safety and other financial sides of it. They have 2 arenas they can play in. Other teams have 1. So I have no sympathy for the Steelers. None. Not a lick. On the ice, yeah, okay, I can understand their fans, having sympathy for their fans, but the organisation I have no sympathy for, because they're so intertwined with the Elite League. It's just the guy who owns them owns the Elite League. For me, that would be a massive conflict of interest, and that's one of the reasons which I think is holding back the sport in the UK. And the way they handled the Edinburgh Capital situation, their boss, I think the Elite League needs to deal with these situations differently and try and find solutions. And it's a complicated situation. I think getting Guildford and Milton Keynes in the league was a good start. I think it expands the game in the south of the UK. It gives us more accessibility to the higher level. But I think the EPIHL was working brilliantly until the Elite League said, we're going to have those 2 teams, please. and Manchester couldn't get the support it needed to keep going, which then left the EPIHL in a sticky situation with only 7 teams. I am surprised they didn't try and get a team like Streatham or Billingham, perhaps maybe the Blackburn Hawks or the Solihull Barons, or a team that was more South UK based to come in to keep the league going. But they did vote and they agreed that long term that wasn't going to be a success. Possibly. I think if the sport is gonna continue to be a success, the Elite League now has this TV deal, and that is bringing some extra income in. But it is what it is. Cycling actually gets more coverage than judo and squash. Cycling actually gets a hell of a lot of coverage. We've seen the world. We see the Tour de France splashed all over, the Vuelta, the Giro. They are all over the media. Big teams in there, a lot of money in those events. Some of the one-day classics are shown. The Tour of Britain, the Tour of Yorkshire. Yes, I would say cycling is getting the TV coverage, not solely on the Olympic Games, but on the professional side. The World Track Championships, they're shown over here in the UK, easily accessible. Judo and squash, no, it doesn't get much coverage unless you go on the internet and look on YouTube to see the sport being played. Judo, again, it's a very niche sport. Very, very niche. Cycling does get the coverage. Judo and squash don't. And that is, again, down to what the sport is. Cycling has got a massive fan base, big following. A lot of issues with cycling, but it's a sport with actually more money than people realise in it. I think it's grown massively over recent years with 3 British Tour de France champions, whether they deserve to win or not, with aiding from some steroids in there, I think, with some pharmaceutical aiding in there, but that is cycling. It's just awash with doping. Cycling hit the real big headlines when Lance Armstrong admitted to cheating for so long. I think cycling's in the headlines for the wrong reasons. That means any rider now who wins a race or a stage is automatically under scrutiny. And that is what it is. Why do I whistle randomly? I'm not whistling randomly. Am I? That could be that. My vape. I don't know. I'm not whistling randomly. Am I? I don't hear a whistle. It could be like, I don't know. It is what it is. It's a quirk. Let's put it in there. Let's just keep it. Let's just keep it as a channel quirk. It's kind of cool. I didn't realize I was doing it, but it's what it is. What else was I asked last night? Yes, I was asked on non-sporting side of things. I was asked about, obviously, Red Dead Redemption 2 and Assassin's Creed. I've done a review on Assassin's Creed and I've completed the main storyline of that game. There's still bits to do, but I've completed that. Red Dead Redemption 2. So if you're interested in gaming, esports, something that is getting spoken about a lot right now is the esports movement. And I haven't really been following esports much, but it is growing and there are massive competitions and there's a lot of money on the line in esports. So the amount of times I get questioned on here about, what video game have I been playing today, or what's my view on this video game or this film, or what games do I like? Esports. Are they classified as sports, or is it, an entertainment kind of competition? It's a gaming competition. Esports is getting big. There's a lot of money. Sponsors are getting involved. Twitch, as the other streaming service, are involved heavily. I've got a Twitch account. YouTube, there are videos on YouTube of esports, so it is getting coverage online. It's getting big interest, especially in North America. Massive interest in North America. There is a lot of interest here in the UK as well, and I'm going to have to do a video on it because where the sponsors are going, a lot of sponsors involved in this, a lot of money, and it's not snuck up on us. It's online gaming competitions have been there for 2 decades now. It's been around for 20 odd years. It's now getting big. It's now, with the advances in technology, getting big. So esports, look out for esports. If you are a gamer, sign up for a competition. Even if you come last, it doesn't matter. It's an experience. I might have to sign up for a Call of Duty one because I play Call of Duty. I might have to sign up for an esports competition at some point. I think it'd be fun just taking part, even if I come last and get battered. I would give it a go. It looks kind of fun. But there are some of these gamers are really intense about it. This is their income. It is an income stream. Sponsorship's gone through the roof, prize money's gone through the roof. So I'm going to have a look at esports and see, what the projected growth is. Talking about technology, the use of video technology in football, and this came up on another live stream that I was participating in. I finished my live stream, went on Mike Talks Football's live stream, and I discussed VAR. I asked the VAR question. I am surprised that football has taken this long to use technology or experiment with technology in the refereeing of a game with VAR and goal line. Other sports have left football behind in this regard. Now, football is the wealthiest sport in the world, but I am so surprised that it has taken this long, considering that rugby, cricket, ice hockey, I'm surprised that football took this long. Yes, there are Fortnite players. Fortnite has helped grow esports. I'm not a fan of Fortnite personally myself, but actual sports players have obviously got their own Fortnite little clans going. We've seen it with football players and rugby players playing a lot of Fortnite, the Fortnite celebrations when they score goals or score tries. The fact that, yes, a Fortnite player was on the front of a well-known sports magazine did rile some, but it's a discussing point. And if betting companies are now getting involved and the prize money is getting so much bigger, and these esporters this is, their income stream. It's like a YouTuber with an income stream. It's a way to make a living. And if you're good at it, you're good at it. And esports has been around for, 20 years. It's only in the last, I would say 2-3 years that it's finally getting mainstream recognition by betting companies, by sponsors, by Twitch, like TV rights, live streaming rights. It's now growing, and there's competitions between gaming clubs. They have their own teams that they put forward to bigger events. They have their own little mini leagues that they select their best players to go for. Right, this is the all-star team from this league to play at this event. Some events have thousands of people playing who bring their own setups. They come, they game, they go home. The FaZe clan are a pain in the arse, and I've come across a lot of them online. Some are fake FaZe. The FaZe clan itself, the true FaZe clan, I play against a lot of them, and they are good gamers. Is ice hockey in betting apps and shops? Yes. There are some betting apps where you can find the NHL, especially because now the legalization of gambling across the US, it's freed up a lot more betting opportunities. The NHL has now partnered with MGM Resorts, much like the NBA, because the gambling laws in the US have changed. It's going to become more accessible, yes. Can you find it on every app? No. Can you find it in every betting shop? Probably not. But there is a growing betting market there now because of the relaxing of betting laws across all of the US states and territories. Before, it was only certain locations you were allowed to gamble, like Atlantic City and Vegas and Reno. Now they've opened up every single US state to legalize gambling. So that's going to change the fact that you can bet on ice hockey, you can bet on the NBA, NFL, you can bet more on American sports now, or sports that are played in the US. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Elite League come up. But I'll probably start with the NHL first, and then as the sport again continues to gain momentum, you'll see betting opportunities. Whether that's right or wrong, you will see that. But yes, the FaZe clan, I've come across them playing Call of Duty a lot. You got the proper FaZe clan, and then you got those who just put FaZe on their clan tag when it's not actually their clan tag. I have come across the proper FaZe clan. They are a good bunch of gamers. And if you get them on the group chat, they're pretty cool. They do every Call of Duty competition, season pass competition. They do every third person shooter you can think of. They are involved with a lot of those kind of things like Battlefield and Call of Duty. That's, I think, where they've made their name. But here's the thing: a lot of people like who aren't me or you, for example, who are a bit older, wouldn't necessarily know about this. It's more of a younger generational thing. But as I say, online gaming's been going for 20 years. So some of these online gamers are in their 40s and 50s. I'm just saying that some of these esporters are actually quite old, and people forget that. They've been doing this for 20 odd years. But it is a lot of young people are involved in it. It's good fun. And there is prize money to be had. And yeah, the fact that a Fortnite player was on the cover of a sports magazine, and that did create some negative responses, just shows how it's getting into the mainstream consciousness. It's getting recognition, and when a new sport or a new team or a new individual, it's going to be a dividing kind of topic, and that's kind of what esports is about. It's about growth, and it is going to divide opinion. It's like any sportsman. I could name a sportsman, and some people would say, I love that sportsman, or I love that team, and other people will be highly critical of that team or sportsman. And that just shows either A, how good they are, or they're seen as a threat by the mainstream establishment. So esports is being seen as a threat to mainstream sport. But there's also a side thing to this, the whole Fortnite question. A lot of high-profile sportsmen have been playing Fortnite excessively, both in the NHL, Premier League football, NFL. And coaches are ripping their hair out, going, "I want you to focus on the team, please. I want you to focus on playing here, this sport. Stop playing so much on that." And some of the players have come out and said, "Yeah, I play 17 hours a day on Fortnite, or I play 10 hours a day on Assassin's Creed, or I play this game for so long." And their coaches are ripping their hair out. So there is some kind of, it is in the debating sphere right now, and it's getting coverage, which can only help grow interest in esports. But I'm going to have to look at esports, and the fact they're offering in-play odds is insane. But I am going to have to look at doing a research video on esports at some point. It's clearly of interest to a lot of people. Yeah, and Kane, Ali, and Trippier, while they are pretty good players, of late they haven't been playing as well, and they have been criticised for playing as much on Fortnite as they are. Yes, it means they're more accessible to the fans, they seem more down to earth, but again, this is a big thing. It's not just Fortnite, it's all any kind of game at the moment. Call of Duty, Black Ops 4, if you play that, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption. A lot of players are coming out, sportsmen are saying, "Oh yeah, like, what do you do in your spare time?" "I play, like, when I'm not training or playing, I'm playing this video game." Yeah, it could be anything. It could be any video game. It's not just Fortnite. It's a variety of games. Fortnite's the big one at the moment, a big talking point at the moment. But and their coaches are coming out and saying, "We would rather they didn't do this. We'd rather they focus on what they're paid to do, which is play football, play rugby, play ice hockey, play cricket, play whatever sport it is, and focus on their training and their development and working on this, rather than spending so much time on that." They understand there's got to be some downtime, but the fact that they're actually putting so much effort into their Fortnite YouTube videos is concerning some of their coaches. And as someone who obviously enjoys going on the games console, yes, it can be a distraction. Yes, it can lead to excessive gaming. I mean, I think I've spent 56 hours of gameplay on Assassin's Creed, and I've basically finished the game. There's still, I would say, about 10, 15 hours of gameplay in which for me to finish the game. But I've basically spent in total, we're talking what, 5-6 days in total playing on Assassin's Creed out of the last 3 weeks. Solid. That's every day. So you break that down. That's what, 5-6 hours a day average, something like that. Yeah, that can happen. And then I spent about 10 hours yesterday playing Red Dead Redemption 2. So yeah, it does happen. And if you are like me, off work at the moment with an injury or in between contracts, or if you're a player and you are out injured, yeah, okay, it can happen. But when you're actually fully fit and able to play, yeah, coaches rip their hair out. But if you go back 25 years, Paul Gascoigne, he was playing squash at the middle of the night before an FA Cup semi-final. So they've sort of found another way to get rid of their nervous energy, I suppose. Paul Gascoigne used to go out and play squash at the team hotel at 4:30 in the morning the night before an FA Cup semi-final. So it's gone from playing squash at 4:30 in the morning to playing Fortnite till 4:30 in the morning. I think that another debate with the video game thing, and yeah, GoldenEye N64 esports then would have been hilarious. I think that's the early days of online gaming with when you had all the Ethernet cables and local area networks, or the four controllers in there on the multi-tap and the PlayStation, things like that. 20 years ago, that's when it was in its infancy, and now it's got to where it is. PC gaming started this, and now consoles have reached a point where they're so powerful that But yeah, no, but it's not really a physical activity. You're sat down playing it, whereas when you are playing basketball, football, tennis, having a little kickabout, five-a-side, bit of touch rugby, you are outside, you are exercising, you are getting fresh air. And that's a big debate because a lot of kids right now are obese. There is an obesity crisis. There's, a lack of physical activity. There is health issues related to lack of exercise. And that is a big debating point, that not enough people are getting their regular exercise. Is there anything wrong with gaming? No. But if they were, it's again how the media portrays it, and it's again these guys are paid a lot of money, big salaries, and so again it's that kind of role model kind of aspect. I think that's one of the reasons why, because a lot of these sports stars across the world, it's not just in Premier League football, NFL players, NHL players, because a lot of these big sports stars in the leagues that they play and the sports they play are playing things like Fortnite and Call of Duty. Young kids see that and see their role models doing it, so they want to copy. There is a problem. I mean, this summer I did spend most of my time solidly working. I didn't have time to basically be outdoors and relax and have the five-a-side kickabout I used to, or play the basketball down my local basketball court, or even though I don't like play basketball, I still shoot the hoop occasionally, play frisbee down my local park, because I just did not have the available free time to do so. And then the temperature got so hot that you would come in from work and basically want to be ill because it was 35 degrees. And that's called being a working adult. However, there is an issue with not enough people getting regular exercise away from work and relaxing, and even if it's just going for a walk for an hour with the dog. I'm lucky that my mate has 2 dogs. I regularly see him. I regularly help him walk his dogs because he has family issues where his aunt's not very well. His grandmother passed away, so his household has shrunk, but they have all these responsibilities. So I help him out. I'm getting my regular exercise every so often. However, not enough people do so. There is an obesity crisis. There is a health crisis. If they were seen to play Fortnite for a little bit, but then go, oh, by the way, even though I'm out on injury or I've not been well, I am still exercising, and that trickle down, young people might do more exercise. It's a two-way street here. But there is an issue. It's a wider issue with facilities for kids and adults to exercise and do outdoor activities. Being a lot of playing fields have gone. A lot of what were open spaces that were free access are now private land. If you're seen on it, you can get done for trespass. So there's issues with that. There's issues with local sports facilities not being in a good state. So as football pitches, astroturfs, rugby pitches, cricket pitches, they're not in a great state of repair. Parks are damaged. There is an issue with on the social side of things when it comes to public health and the availability of youth centres. And even at a youth centre, you're still playing Fortnite because they'll have a games console, they'll have a PC. You can bring your own console along, but there is a lack of access there, so they stay at home. So they don't even want to walk to the youth centre where there are other activities such as snooker tables, pool tables, dartboards, table tennis tables, that kind of. So there's a wider issue, and because these guys are seen as role models for young kids, the fact that they're doing this, the young kids think it's okay to do it. Am I a gamer? Yes, but do I also enjoy going out and have a little five-a-side kickabout or playing a bit of frisbee when I can? Yeah, I'm lucky that down the road from me there are a couple of really nice parks, um, and we do have some facilities where I live. But again, you know, again, it's the structure of the school day. If you're still at school, the structure of the college day, if you're at sixth form, or the structure of university, it's the way the education structure is worked. There's not enough. It is very regimented, and I think the best way you learn is through doing things. It's probably why when I was doing sports school, we had compulsory sports we had to do, and some of them I wasn't very good at or I didn't enjoy, such as basketball. People go, why do I dislike the NBA? I don't hate the NBA. I just don't like basketball. I think it's a very healthy league. I think the quality level is world class, but I don't enjoy playing it, and I just about tolerate watching it because I was forced to do a sport in like. Same with tennis. I enjoy watching it. I hate playing it. Um, Field hockey, I actually don't mind field hockey. I was a goalie, so I didn't have to do much. I just had to get in way of the shot. And I enjoyed playing in goal. Didn't enjoy being an outfield player, but I enjoyed being a goal. And I do enjoy watching field hockey. Ice hockey, again, because I played field hockey in goal, I actually enjoy watching ice hockey because it's a slightly different, it's obviously a different sport, but at the same time, basic principle is get the thing in the back of the net. Yes, again, there are issues with safe places for kids to go out and enjoy the outdoors. But in countries like Iceland, they have indoor facilities that are open all year round, even to the depths of winter, where they can play football, they can play frisbee, they can do stuff. They've got artificial turf. It's safe. It's in the community centre. That is something that the UK could do, is just have these indoor community centres where you go in there, but it's not video games. It is, you're playing football, you're playing indoor cricket, you're playing touch rugby, you're playing indoor frisbee, something like that, where they can still actively do stuff in the depths of winter when the weather isn't nice, when the light is dark early. And the Icelandic government has put a lot of money into that. And yes, it's a smaller country, and yes, there's less people, but bang, there is something for kids to do. Either get involved in sport, watch sport. That's why I'm not 100% sold on the school zone at the Bracknell Bees, but at the same time, I understand why they're doing it. It's to get kids interested in a sport, and if that means their parents then go, right, we'll pay for this kid to get into the sport and do your youth coaching, go through the youth levels, it's a great way to get more kids involved, be it watching, playing, officiating, coaching, whatever. And it is what it is. I think getting more kind of youth community drives going like that. I think more sports, I think it's going to come down to the sports teams themselves rather than the local authorities. I don't want to get into a political discussion because that will bore people. That's for the other channel. This is for the sports channel where it's more fun. I don't want to bore people with constant discussions about the politics side of it, but local authorities, they obviously don't want to spend the money. It's going to come down to the private individual companies or teams. So the fact that Bracknell Bees have got this, outreach program, and if the Swindon Wildcats have got that, again, I don't see why your school or your sixth form or your college doesn't want to do that. It's a great opportunity for a good community thing. It'll keep kids off the streets at night, because there's two things that will happen. One, the kids want to stay home and go and play video games, or two, when they are out and about, they're loitering in gangs. They don't do much. And this is an issue that I've seen when I was working in Birmingham, when I was visiting my family and friends in London, when I go see my mates in Reading, when I'm on my motorbike riding through Maidenhead, Bracknell, wherever it is in the Thames Valley, there's a lot of street gangs. There's a lot of teenage kids with nothing to do, loitering around, up to no good. Not that they necessarily intend to be up to no good, but that then leads to other things such as drugs, gang violence. And it's a slippery slope. Because if you give something to distract the kids, they're going to do something. I've noticed a rise in youth offending where I live. My brother has even got in fights, and there are gangs involved at not just his school, but every school in the area. We've seen a lot of kids carrying knives. And again, this is something I don't want to talk about on this channel, but it has to be spoken about. This is how youth crime becomes a thing, and this is how these kids go from petty crime, bit of vandalism, bit of graffiti, getting involved in drug dealing, and they end up getting on to more serious stuff and end up with a lifetime in and out of prison and a lifetime of criminality and it. And as someone who's been that troublesome youth as well, is it worth it long term? No, it's actually made my life more difficult as an adult. But I'd rather see more youth incentives to give kids something to do, and break that cycle of delinquency and I've noticed there's a lot more youth crime than there was 10 years ago. It comes in cycles, but sport is a great way to get kids. And even if esports work and they do get kids thinking, I can do something here in my free time, there are some positives. There's a lot of positives to esports. It's an activity that they can do, and there's no harm, no foul. We've got to give kids something to do. We've got to give them youth facilities. We've got to give them playing fields. Even esports, even if it's a youth club where they have an esports team, it's giving something for them to do. And even if they do join the football team, they're still again, it doesn't matter if they're getting involved in football or ice hockey. The kids are doing something, and that's important. And it's a difficult talking point. But the fact that the teams themselves are having to do these initiatives without the support necessarily of the local government, that's a concern. I think local government should also back these initiatives that sports teams, doesn't matter what level they're playing at, are doing. If sports clubs and sports are the ones leading the way, that shows how bad the local authorities and how lazy the local authorities are. There are funding constraints, but if they were just to give their seal of approval, I think it would help mend some society's ills, because it will get kids out of street gangs. It will get kids out of the petty crime and the loitering and the boredom, because kids are bored. They want to have a lot of energy to burn off, and one way to do that is through activities. Keep them busy. If they're not busy, they're bored, they're frustrated, they will act out, they will do silly things, they'll get in trouble, and lo and behold, you end up with a criminal record. It's a very easy, simple solution. Give them something to do. I think, yes, the way the Wildcats rink is laid out isn't great. As someone who's been there and as an away fan and sat downstairs behind the goal, it's not great. I think that's what's holding Swindon back from possibly taking that step up to the league above. Again, it's all about how they decide to look at the rink they've got and how they rearrange the seating. It's down to that, but the Link Centre has some council involvement, I believe. So there's various things that could be done. But again, I would get rid of one of the bars behind one of the goals and do it that way. Put some seating in there. But again, that's what I would do. I'm not the rink operator. I'm not the team. It is good to see that Swindon regularly packs out, and that is good to see, of no doubt. But yeah, the rink does need some improvement in some areas. I think every team would say there are issues with a stadium or an arena or a rink they play in, and fans would say, "Oh, this could be better. That could be better. This isn't great." There's always going to be that small group of fans or that one gripe about a location. It's nothing new. It doesn't go away. It's still going to be there. But again, it shows the popularity when you're outstripping capacity with fans. There's more fans than the capacity can hold. That shows the popularity of the team and how fans are interested. If you were to look at paid versus actual attendance, if you're regularly getting interest for tickets that's above capacity, that shows you've got a good healthy fan base and you've got a good healthy organisation there. if you're regularly when you put tickets up for sale or applications for tickets, even if you've sold out and it's less than 100%, between 80 and 90, it's not 80 and 100 is not bad. If it's below that 80, you know there's a problem with a disconnect between fans and the organisation, or the team is struggling, or there's a culture issue, or there's definitely things wrong, and you need to look at it. But no, the fact that the Swindon Wildcats, I still think there is space for more seats, definitely. But again, it's what the Link Centre are willing to do, and it's again about money and whether they're willing to spend the money. Obviously, they're turning a profit. Otherwise, Swindon wouldn't be there, and you wouldn't have. Obviously, things are good. Otherwise, you wouldn't have applications for tickets outstripping capacity, and hence why they wouldn't have put the extra capacity in the first place. But there are things that yes, definitely need to be adjusted there. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. They're making the best use of the space possible. Could they make it better? Possibly. Yeah. The fact that Swindon and Bracknell and other teams in ice hockey at least are doing this school outreach program is good. If I can go back to that, it would be nice if the local authorities in Swindon and in Bracknell decided to also put some money into these outreach programs. It would be nice because I do think they have cut back on youth services. They have cut back on youth clubs and safe places for them to go and have fun. There are budgetary constraints. And again, if you want to talk politics, we have another channel for that. And it does get boring and dull, and I don't really think sports fans really give a toss about politics. But you're one fan who has that opinion. If you were to poll all the Swindon fans who regularly go, and the away fans, such as me, let's say I've gone on once. If you were to poll us and, what our views were on what changes we would make, you would get a very wide range of responses to a poll. If you were the Link owners and you were to put out what changes would you make to the arena, you would get such a wide variety of complaints. Probably you would probably get changes to the entrance, changes to the ticketing system, changes to the seating, maybe get rid of one of the bars, things like that. No, relaying the ice doesn't take that long. It only takes a day or two to do an ice relay. It really does. It doesn't take as long as you think. It's just that you've got to shut for 2 days to do it. It doesn't. It's the same with Bracknell. The logo's faded. Do that in the off season. Less people ice skate in the summer. That's the perfect time to do rink maintenance. It doesn't take that long actually to lift the ice surface, completely get rid of an ice surface and relay it. It really doesn't. It's a lot quicker than you think. That is something that they can do in summer, and actually, they can even top it up and touch it up in season. It doesn't take that long to put an ice surface down. It's just time consuming, and you do lose out on revenues at the ice rink for a period of a couple of days. Hence why the Link Centre has a multi-use facility, and the Bracknell Bees, the John Nike Centre, is a multi-use facility. There's the dry slope, there is the pool club. So they're lucky in the sense they're multi-use facilities. Other rinks aren't so lucky. But Streatham themselves, they have a multi-use car facility as well, so they're quite lucky. Other rinks aren't so good and aren't so fortunate with the multi-use facility thing. So when they have to do rink maintenance, it means the building is shut down and not open, and the company is losing revenue. The wristband thing, we used to have the hand stamp thing that just washes off. The wristband thing, it's a bit fiddly to get on, but again, it gives them an idea of how many people have actually come in attendance. They look how many wristbands they've given out, and it gives them an idea on attendance. And it cooperates with ticket sales. So it gives an idea on attendance and how many people have actually turned up. They look at how many wristbands they've ordered, how many they've got left, and it gives them an rough idea on attendance. So it's to do with attendance figures, and then they compile that and they give that data over and say, look, this is how many people we've had average at games. And it works. It helps them work out how to promote games as well. The Steel Dogs Arena is decent, yes. I think I think it's newer as well. It's more modern. It also had a refurb as well, so it's in a better state than some of the rinks. A lot of the rinks in the UK were built in the 80s and early 90s and haven't been fully refurbed. So they have an advantage on having a better rink because it's newer, because it's in more modern. Um, but again, they also are in such a good state because the Steelers play some of their games there in the regular season because the Sheffield Arena, the main arena, is also used for music concerts and other events because of its size. So they do play some games in the preseason and the regular season there. So it has to be of a decent standard. They don't have much choice in that. Wow, we've discussed a lot of random stuff today. We have discussed a lot of random stuff. I started out on the NFL and the NBL, Major League Baseball, and the NFL and their games in London. And we've ended up talking about British ice hockey. It's just amazing how these live streams go. I do think though that on talking about stadiums and arenas and rinks and seating and stuff like that, regularly people do complain about more modern facilities. We've seen a lot of complaints about Wembley. We've seen complaints about the Emirates, especially in the top tier. You're so far away from the game. In Australia, in the NRL, Parramatta have got their new stadium are basically nearly finished in Western Sydney, where other teams also will use, but it's primarily Parramatta are going to be using that stadium. And they have allegedly designed it for rugby league. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out next year. They're refurbing a couple of stadiums in the Australian NRL. And there are complaints about some of the Aussie stadiums. There's complaints about, obviously, Wembley and accessibility. To be fair, I've been to a lot of football stadiums and I've been to a lot of ice rinks, and I've been to cricket grounds, I've been to rugby grounds, I've been to a lot of stadiums over the years. I would say my favourite's Twickenham. My favourite stadium is Twickenham. But when I went to Twickenham, the South Stand hadn't fully been rebuilt to what it is now. That's the last time I went to Twickenham. They were just starting to rebuild the South Stand. When I last went to Twickenham, that was a good 10 years ago. So a lot's happened at Twickenham since I last went, but my favourite stadium that I ever went to was Twickenham. I've been to Anfield. You get good views all around Anfield. I've been there. I've done Brentford. I've done Fratton Park at Portsmouth. I've done St Mary's. I've done Watford. I've done Craven Cottage. I've done Loftus Road is a weird stadium because you're so close to everything. It's really tight. It's a really weird stadium at Loftus Road. I wouldn't say it's Premier League standard. I don't know how QPR are allowed to still play in that. You're so close. You could just literally lean out and you can touch the players. I've been in my fair share of stadiums over the years, and for me, Twickenham was the best that I've been to. And it's been a while since I've been to a football or rugby match and cricket as well. But I did find them enjoyable going. I think it's now more the price that puts me off. The old Olympic Park in Melbourne, that was a bit of a weird stadium. I will admit that the old Olympic Park in Melbourne was a bit on the old. What is this? I have been to some pretty shocking stadiums. I'm not gonna lie. I think, but again, you got to look at the time the match was played, when it was played. The standard of stadia back in the 80s is not the standard that we expect now. A lot has changed in how stadiums are built and seated and tiered, and how how they're constructed. Yes, you can still have the safe standing areas depending on the local authority and depending on the rules of the country you're watching the game in. The all-seater rule when it comes to stadiums in this country is primarily for Premier League football and Championship level football. Rugby, there's a lot of safe standing areas at stadiums, both league and union. Cricket, is hit and miss. They try and say all seater, but you can have the grassy bank. Ice hockey, there's a lot of standing areas at rinks in the UK downstairs or behind or by the glass. So there are safe standing areas at other events, I think. But when it comes to football, or if you want to call it soccer, yeah, they've gone for the whole all-seater stadium thing. The 80s was a time of things called football hooligans. And the idea behind all-seater stadiums was the ticket price would go up slightly to price the hooligans out of coming to games. Yeah, that hasn't happened because it just means expensive seats get broken when an old terrace would do. But yeah, no, the move, there are plans to bring back safe standing areas at elite level competition in football and I think rugby union, rugby league. There are plans to, if your stadium is an all-seater, to have a safe standing area. I think it's going to be primarily aimed at the OAPs and kids, so those with families and those of let's say pensioners. I think that's going to be what they're going to aim at. But at the same, on the same token, it is a debating point that's come along in the last couple of years, is the safe standing debate here in the UK when it comes to football. A lot of fans, are wanting it. It may reduce ticket prices because that's another discussing point. Is the price of tickets for football in the UK that's been regularly criticised? The ticket price that we as fans have to pay to watch a game. It comes up on not just my live streams, but I think every live stream of sport that I watch. When it comes to live streams of sports on sports YouTubers, ticket pricing is a question that is asked regularly. It regularly comes up. It regularly gets mentioned and discussed. And you've also got the argument with paid attendance and actual attendance, and the amount of corporate tickets that teams give out, and the amount of empty seats in all-seater stadiums, which look really, really bad for TV. I've noticed that a lot with the use of ANZ and Allianz Park in the Australian Rugby League and the NRL. I've noticed it a lot in the AFL when I've managed to catch highlights of a game or watch a game in the AFL. Some of those stadiums, again, the corporate tickets given out, a lot of empty seats. I've noticed it in the Premier League. If you look at last night's footage of Tottenham versus Man City last night, only 56,000 turned up. A lot of empty seats at Wembley last night, considering that that's 6,000 less than their average and a lot less than their Champions League match they had in midweek last week. A 360-degree stadium where you can watch from any angle. I think the only way you're going to get that is with virtual reality. I don't think you're going to get that from a seating position. There are some stadiums where you can see the action from any seat you sit at easily, and there are some where it's not as you can't quite necessarily see that corner or that section. There are some stadiums that are very, very good for being close to the action and good seating position. The 360-degree stadium, I think that's only going to come with virtual reality, with VR. I don't see it happening actually in reality unless you have a plexiglass, fiberglass pitch where you can actually be underneath and physically watch it. I don't know how you're going to do that. Like an aquarium tank with pressurized glass. I don't know how you would do that. It will be really interesting if that was to happen. I can see that happening with virtual reality in the future. I can see that sort of like with online gaming with the virtual reality headsets they're now selling. I can sort of see that happening. But whether, it does is another thing entirely. And how much would those tickets cost? I mean, would those tickets kind of be affordable? Would people want to see that? Would people want to go that far into, the sport? Would they want that kind of experience? Would it be a one-off experience, or would it be like a regular season ticket experience? I'd much rather have it as a one-off experience rather than all the time, because that's one way you give yourself a paralyzing stroke or a heart attack, if I'm honest, because the amount of endorphins in your body will probably kill yourself with the amounts of intensity. It's But it is an interesting question, and it again comes back to the use of technology in sport. You know, it is an interesting topic. I mean, look at me. I'm using my headset, my gaming headset again, because of the continuing experiment for sound quality that we have on the channel. Oh, yeah. I do think that at some point, yes, there will be some kind of VR experience to watch a game with virtual reality, be it in the stadium or at home. Whether it works, another thing, and whether that's a one-off experience that you would want, or could it be marketed as an everyday experience? How much would it cost? Would that put more mainstream fans off? It's all open up for discussion, but the evolution of technology advances daily. With the evolutions in technology, my vape's leaking. It is definitely a debating point. It's definitely a debating point. I mean, I look at vape technology, and they've come so far in 4 years since I last bought my last vape, which was a very similar device. The steps they've taken just in e-cigs or virtual reality or software and mobile phones, the steps that have been taken over the last 20 years are crazy. Do we actually need some of these like ultra 4K HD TVs? Probably not. In fact, I don't think we do. I think actually gives you. I don't know. I'm not sold on the 4K TVs. I'm not sold necessarily on everything tech-wise that has come our way in the last 20 years. Do I like DVD? Yes. Do I like Blu-ray? The picture quality is not much different. It can hold more data and it's a bit more scratch resistant, but it's not really much different. It's not the price markup that it should be. Do I think the next gen of console is going to be insane and really expensive? Yes. Would I get one? Probably. But again, yeah, I think the 4K HD, I think it gives me a headache. But if you've got a 4K ready games console like an Xbox One, and the game is also designed to actually play on a full HD 4K, it does have a glitch effect with some bits of the screen doing that kind of image, and that gives me a headache. I think they've gone too far with this 4K thing and the Ultra HD and the Sky Q. It sometimes leaves you with a headache, feeling not very well, and I don't like that. I don't like that feeling when you're watching telly and the program is designed to be seen in 4K and you've got it in Ultra HD but not quite 4K. You actually get that kind of distortion of the image where it gets a little bit blurry and a bit flickery, which you used to get in the old analog TV when the signal was a bit crap. It gives you a headache. And the human body, is evolved to see so much. If you've got perfect vision, you're evolved to see so much. You end up feeling unwell. You get headaches. You get dizzy. You get disorientated. It's not nice because your brain can only process so much of an image. It's interesting topics like how far we can go with tech, but I think there's got to be a point where, hold on a sec, we need to slow this technological development down when it comes to commercial, selling to the public. When it comes to science and it comes to that kind of technology, yeah, keep it going. But when it comes to, selling to Joe Public his next games console, his next TV, I think we need to possibly slow down the craziness here. I think we're reaching a point where, hang on a second, we're too much of a throwaway society. Let's make some of these devices last 20 years, like the old analog TVs. I mean, my old telly was 30 years old when it blew up. I got an adapter for the back. I could play my Xbox on it. I think we need to start seriously look at the throwaway culture we have. But that's, again, another video for the other channel. Let's go back to sport. Let's get back to sport. Yeah, they claim they have. I think they've just got a good team ethic. They've got a good coach. They've got the right balance between attack and defence. They're having a very good start to the season as a promoted side. They're obviously going to try and claim that because every team is going to have opposition scouts scouting out what they're doing, have their spies, their moles, whether they admit it or not. And they're going to try and hide whatever they're doing by giving out some bollocks at a press conference to throw the opposition off the scent of their tactics or their training regime. That's what it comes down to. We've seen it in F1. We've seen it in other forms of motorsport. Like, we've got this advantage from an aero package. It's in the rules, but we're hiding it from everyone else, and no one else can get this kind of idea to have a diffuser or a rear wing or a front splitter or a new brake brake system or new turbo. We're going to hide that from everyone else, but we're going to admit to having it. It's sort of just trying to throw the opposition off the scent. It's trying to give yourself a competitive advantage. The thing is, Wolverhampton, they're not actually winning the Premier League, so it doesn't matter what kind of training regime they've got. They're not at the top of the table like Liverpool, Man City, so they have got a ways to go to be at that level. But they have had a very good start to the season. They have got a very solid team together. They've got a good coach. I think it comes down to coaching and tactics and the availability of what they've got as a squad. They've recruited well. Half the Portuguese national side, so they've recruited well. It is Portugal in the Midlands. They've just taken Lisbon and gone, we'll move that to Wolverhampton, which is not a good swap. I'd rather go to Lisbon than Wolverhampton, but they've seemed to have taken half of Lisbon's population and transplanted it in the West Midlands. The coaching philosophy is different. It's a breath of fresh air. They showed last year in the FA Cup and League Cup they could compete with teams from the level above. Now they're in that level above. They're showing that they still had that compete level, and I did think they would be fine. And I do think they're going to be a healthy mid-table side pushing for the top 10 from here on forward. The other promoted sides haven't had the luck. Cardiff, they were the second overall team in the Championship last year. They're fourth bottom. Fulham got through to the playoffs. They've got a shocking goal difference. And I think between Cardiff and Fulham, that's going to come down to goal difference to keep one of those sides up. Huddersfield, your team, they've got the fight and the passion. They just don't quite have the goal scoring ability. They need to get their scoring players, their forward attacking players, get the ball in the net. Personally, Newcastle, I think, are done. Newcastle are definitely done. They don't seem to have the drive, the fight, the passion. They got nothing there. Huddersfield, I think, have the fight to get out of the situation and the passion. Fulham don't have the defence. Cardiff don't have the defence. I think if Huddersfield can get a couple of wins, Cardiff and Fulham, I don't think have enough to get out of the hole. Newcastle are done. I'm saying that now. Newcastle haven't got a hope of getting out of the situation because, but as I said, if Ashley doesn't back me in January, I'm leaving. So if they don't get any signings done in January or get players in who can make an impact, he's walking. I think, if Huddersfield can get 3-4 wins, they suddenly pressure's off them. And it's back on Fulham. It's back on Cardiff. Newcastle are in just crap. They're in the trouble deep. West Ham and Crystal Palace aren't great themselves. Neither are Burnley. And then there's a gap to Leicester. Now, Leicester have had their own issues, and we're not going to discuss that today, but we know what's happened with Leicester. From Leicester down to the rest, there is a massive gap. Burnley are underperforming this season. Palace are underperforming this season. And then you get into the chaos that is Fulham, Cardiff, Huddersfield, and Newcastle. Newcastle are just done. I can see West Ham getting dragged into there if with Yarmolenko, if Arnautovic gets injured. I can see West Ham slipping down there as well. I think Huddersfield have got the fight, they've got the passion. I just don't see that with Newcastle. I don't see that with Fulham. I don't really see it with Cardiff, especially with Warnock coming out and saying, we don't have a hope in hell to win this game. I'm sorry, he needs to retire. He's had a good managerial career. He's managed a lot of teams, but he's just not cut out for managerial top level anymore. He's just not there. But look at Bournemouth and Watford and where they are. They're on the verge of the top four. They are literally a point or so behind Tottenham. They're a couple points behind Arsenal. Bournemouth and Watford could, and they could get into the top four, both those clubs. If Arsenal have their sticky Christmas period, which they always do, and if Chelsea slip back and Tottenham slip back further, look at Bournemouth and Watford to try and get in the top four this season. Seriously. Man United aren't on the same level as Bournemouth and Watford right now. They're really not. I know Watford lost to Man United in that game, but they've had better form since. Man United haven't. And Bournemouth have been just on fire for their budget. Look at those sides to try and get Champions League or Europa League qualification. The Big Six has been shaken up. The Big Four has been shaken up, or whatever you want to call it. It's been shaken up significantly, and you got to look at the two outstanding teams, I think, at the top of the table that shouldn't be there, and that's Watford and Bournemouth. I'm not surprised they're there, but a lot of people are. Warner needs to go to Latvia. That joke is old. I do think Warnock has reached a point where he needs to retire. I know it's hard to take a step away from something as intense as sport and say, I'm done now. I've had my spell as a manager. I've had my spell as a player or as a coach or as a pundit. I need to take a step back. And sport is very addictive. But he's 70 odd years old now. I think, yeah, it's time for end it now. Because if Cardiff do survive, it will be a miracle. And I'm saying that with love. If Cardiff survive, it'll be a miracle. I know Morlock is he's when you get him outside of a dugout and you get him away from the battle that is football, and you get him away from the game, and you actually just have him being interviewed when he's not actually actively involved in that game. Now he is quite a nice guy, but when you give him a managerial job and you put him in that dugout, he becomes an absolute arsehole. I think, yeah, public perception is everything. Whether he actually is a nice guy behind the scenes or not is another thing. That's the public perception. Is you take him outside of the combative nature, he seems quite nice, but again, we don't know what he's like in private. He comes across as quite a fiery character. He comes across as quite a combative character. But yeah, he seems to like just get into that press conference or in that dugout, and he just becomes an arsehole. I don't know what it is. Must be something in the air. Honestly, a lot of managers are like that. They're very, very calm away from the dugout. They get in to the managerial dugout and they just lose their minds. Is that a fair representation of what he is as a person? Probably not. But he has had some real funny comments and some snippets and some gag reel moments with some of his press conferences. Some of his press conferences are quite funny. I find him quite entertaining to some of his press conferences, because some of them he's out of his depth, and some of them he's actually talking a lot of sense. I think he's been around the game for a long time. Is he cut out as a Premier League manager? That's the thing. He's only had one good season in the Premier League, and that was with Sheffield United. He's only had one complete season. And that is with Sheffield United. And I think they were harshly done by when they were relegated, when West Ham broke transfer rules and weren't punished. We can discuss that. We've been discussing that for 12 years. Yeah, Wagner is actually surprisingly calm and meticulous. He doesn't get animated as much as some other managers. And that is interesting. He's not a very extrovert manager. He doesn't flail his arms. He doesn't shout. He doesn't swear so much. He does have his moments. But yeah, he is pretty calm. I think that's the German style. I've seen a lot of German managers be particularly calm. Jurgen Klopp notwithstanding, when I've watched the Bundesliga highlights or seen Bundesliga, then a lot of German managers aren't so shouty and swearing and throwing their arms up in the air. They seem, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but they do seem a calm bunch. And I think maybe you need that bit of passion, I think, to motivate the players. But for the most part, when I've watched the World Cup or the Euros and Jurgen Löw, he doesn't come across as necessarily the most aggressive manager. He's had his moments, but again, he doesn't shout, scream, and flail his arms about and all the time. He's had his moments, I will admit that, but he doesn't come across as an aggressive manager. Klinsmann, again, when he was in charge of both Germany and the US national side, again, he came across as reasonably calm for the most part. He had his moments of losing his marbles and over celebrating, but I think German managers as a general rule are pretty calm and concise and relaxed. I think it does help their players. I think it does help having that kind of calming mentality and just you're on the touchline going, calm down, guys, calm down. Some of the Italian managers are they're either one of two ways. They're either completely mental or exceptionally calm. Claudio Ranieri is one of the calm Italian managers. Ancelotti is one of the explosive Italian managers, and so is Mancini. So it could be a cultural thing. It could be a personality thing, but Wagner is exceptionally calm under pressure. He knows he's under pressure. He knows Huddersfield haven't had a good start to the season. He knows they are up against it a little bit. But I think this season we could see that record points total by Derby County broken. I could see Newcastle getting less than 11 points. I could see Crapatoni. There are some good jokes. I've missed you. I've missed you on my live streams. I really have. I can see the Derby County points total being broken for lowest ever. I can see less than 11 points. I can see less than 11 points this season. And that is a concern for some of the clubs down there that yeah, there could be a less than 11 points this season. I think all 4 teams at the bottom could get less than 11 points this season. Huddersfield seem to have the passion to get out of it. It's just the lack of goal scoring. Cardiff and Fulham just don't have the defence, and both have got 1 win each. And Newcastle can't even get goals either. They can't get a win either. It could be a record breaking season for all the wrong reasons. Last year was a record breaker for all the good reasons, with a title win and 100 points and over 100 goals scored by the winning side, Man City. This season could be a record breaker for all the wrong reasons. I've looked at the 20 worst Premier League seasons in history. There's quite a few in the teens, all by Sunderland for some reason. And I've also looked at the record breaking, looking at the Premier League's, winning margins of points. And we've seen loads of 70 odd points, and we've obviously not seen as high as 100. So records are there to be broken. They've been broken several times in the Premier League in both the worst team in the league and the best team in the league. I could see Derby County's record of 11 points possibly going this season. Yes, Huddersfield are actually, their supporters are behind the club. I think that's a positive. We'll have to see as the season progresses. If Huddersfield can get that first and then that second win, they're suddenly out of trouble. They're suddenly out of the bottom 3, and the pressure is on Newcastle massively. Cardiff and Fulham, it comes down to defence. Solely defence. Their defences aren't good enough. Newcastle actually have a better goal difference than Fulham and Cardiff. We're talking double figures goals against difference here. We're talking nearly 20 goals against. I think Fulham's at 15, 16, and Cardiff's at 11. So their goal difference is poor. Newcastle is not as bad as that. So if they do get that win, or they start getting more points, as Fulham and Cardiff struggle defensively, goal difference could be massive. Huddersfield's goal difference isn't great either. So Newcastle have that one advantage, is their goal difference is somewhat better. Fulham's manager, though, he hasn't adjusted his tactics. He's playing this free-flowing attacking football, which isn't good enough because they're not scoring enough goals. And at the other end, they can't defend at all. They're just going for broke every time. They're just going for all-out attack every time. Their attack isn't good enough. There's 1 or 2 decent players in there, but overall, defensively, it's a sieve. And going forward, it's just not good enough. But again, it's again what can happen in January. If these 4 clubs get detached at the bottom of the table, that is worrying as well. And if there's a sudden separation between 2 or 3 of them and the bottom club, that could get worrying. It's interesting. I think the Huddersfield Fulham game next Monday is definitely massive for both clubs. If Huddersfield win that, Fulham are in deep trouble. And Cardiff are back in trouble because Huddersfield already have the 3 points. If they get 6 points, they're out of the bottom 3. If Cardiff and Newcastle get points as well, the pressure is on both clubs to get a result. Goal difference is killing Fulham, and I think this is Huddersfield's chance to actually get a hatful of goals and get some confidence. Last season it was just tight. I think West Brom got isolated a little bit, and then Darren Moore came in, and he came in, I think, a month too late. If West Brom got Darren Moore a month or 2 earlier, West Brom stay up, because the form they've shown carrying on into this season, the Championship, has been there. Darren Moore was the right appointment. I think West Brom could bounce back up. I don't think Stoke can. I think Stoke have left themselves a bit too much to do in the Championship this season. But no, I can see these 4 clubs at the bottom getting themselves isolated. But it then depends on West Ham and Burnley and how Leicester bounce back from the tragic scenes of the weekend. Because the mid-table down, there's a 5-point gap. And then suddenly it gets congested between 2, I think 3 and 8 points. There's only 5 points covering nearly half the league. Nearly half, about 8 teams in the league are covered by 5 points. So there is some congestion there, but there's actually a gap appearing between the upper mid-table. Then there's a couple of clubs, and then there's another gap to the rest of the league. I think West Ham could struggle as well. Swansea, I'm not so sure. I think they had reached the end of their run. I think they'd reached the end of their run at that point. I think at that point they were near the end of their their cycle in the Premier League. I think they hadn't kicked on after that League Cup win. They had gone through a lot of managers, and as I say, constantly change the manager, you don't get results. Lopetegui, yeah, Real Madrid. It's mostly to do with politics off the field as well. The way the Spanish Federation dealt with him, saying, "Look, World Cup, I'm still going to be here for the World Cup. Then I'm going to Real Madrid," and then they fired him for the World Cup. The whole stench of Spanish football right now is not good. He hasn't had a good 4 months, but again, they've lost Ronaldo. Gareth Bale's been agitating, before Zidane left, that he didn't feel happy. So there's clearly player unrest. There's I think some of their stars are aging, possibly. Some of their stars are possibly underperforming. The way Lopetegui was dealt with by the Spanish Federation was pretty shitty. I'm going to say that. But the way Real Madrid have dealt with him as well, he's had less than 4 months in the job. That's not going to get it done. I don't think any. I mean, in the past, Real Madrid have gone through so many managers and won trophies, but then they became the Galacticos era. They risk becoming the Galacticos again, Mark II. Lots of overpaid players, lots of big name players, but they can't gel as a team. Somehow Zidane managed to keep the egos in check for us a period of time, but then he was like, "No, I've had enough of this." Cruz has been crap for a while. He's overrated. He really is. Sergio Ramos, he's not as good as people make out defensively. He's a shambles. He's not a centre back. He's a right back, really. He's a right wing back by trade. They played him at centre back now for about half his career. He's not a centre back. He's not good enough. You just got to look at the last two World Cups to see how poor he is in defence. Tony Kroos, I think he is actually overrated. He's just played on some. No, he's played on some very, very, very good teams. Yes, but he's not actually as a big a star player as people make out he is. He does rely on his teammates more than he would like to admit. The World Cup really didn't help his case as a star player. I think the last 4 years he is overrated. I think a lot of players are overrated. I really do. I think a lot of the players based in Spain are severely overrated. If they were to come and play in the Premier League, they would struggle. Oh, wait, we've seen that so many times with so many players that have really shone in La Liga. They come over here and what is that? Who are you? You're crap. You're overrated. I think, yes, La Liga is an overrated league. And I think because there's so few clubs that are actually decent in La Liga, the league is overrated. My personal opinion on it, I think there are other things at play with the Real Madrid story. Are players fully fit? Did they work with the tactics? Behind the scenes with the politics in Spanish football. David Silva, I think just plays well in whatever role you give him. Juan Mata, I think Man United, he needs to get out of Man United. It's not suiting his style of play. There were a couple of other, Negredo and Soldado never really hit it off in the Premier League. They were just hopeless. There have been some good players to come out of Spain to play in the Premier League and other leagues as well, but the Premier League. I think David Silva, yes, is the best. Aguero, yes, he's Argentinian, started out in Argentina, Atletico Madrid, solid there. He has been brilliant as well. He's not a Spanish player, but he did come through the La Liga structure as well for a long period of time as a player. But notice, look at all these big name players like a Messi that don't want to come to the Premier League because they know they're going to get the living crap kicked out of them and they're not actually going to be as good as they claim they are. That's why Ronaldo and Messi got so many goals in La Liga, because it's a less physical league. It's defensively, it's not as good. It's less competitive. If Ronaldo and Messi were to both come to the Premier League, I don't think Ronaldo would have been as good as he was at Real Madrid. They wouldn't score as many goals. They would definitely be flattened quite a bit at the time. Pedro, look at him in Barcelona. Oh, look, he's winning everything. Comes over here, he's not as good. Yeah, I think La Liga is severely overrated. And the way Messi goes, I don't want to play for any other European club other than Barcelona, because he knows he won't necessarily win at any other club apart from Barcelona. I think Messi is exceptionally overrated, partly because of the league he plays in. Ronaldo, I have no time for Ronaldo as a person. I think he's a scumbag, but he's paid hush money to his alleged victim. Ronaldo is just a prat. Never liked him. I never liked him when he was at Man United. I never liked him at Sporting Lisbon. His attitude sucks. He's an arrogant little shit. A friend of mine from Portugal actually is from Madeira, went to school with him and his sister, and he wasn't very liked at school either, and neither was his family. Aren't very popular on the island of Madeira. There is a lasting resentment towards the local lad who left, who could have played for the local club in Madeira in the top flight in Portugal, and decided to go to Sporting Lisbon, which didn't go down well with the locals and local fans of the local club, because the historical connection between Madeira and Portugal was Sporting Lisbon was the government team, in a sense. And when Salazar was the dictator of Portugal, Madeira got treated very harshly. The people weren't given necessarily the same rights. They were treated differently. They were more lower class. They got a lot less funding from central government. Poverty was rife. He falls, and it's all changed. But there is a political element to that. He's not very popular because he went to Sporting Lisbon. But no, there are other players as well who have played in Spain who've come over and are average. They are absolutely average. And I do think La Liga is exceptionally overrated as a league, because there's only a couple of teams that can afford to spend money. Because Diego Costa, again though, with what happened at Chelsea, and how he was handled, it didn't go well. I think Fernando Torres was another good player. He had, towards the end of his time in England, I think injuries were wrecking him rather than loss of form. I think he did have a lot of injuries, and his fitness, I think, let him down. I think the way the media and some of the fans reacted to him was disgraceful. I think Chelsea fans are a classless bunch as a whole. There is a minority that make him classless, but I don't like Chelsea fans as a whole. I find them a classless bunch. The way Torres was treated by Chelsea fans when he was playing at Liverpool was pretty, well, you think it was banter. He gets transferred to Chelsea. He helps them win a European trophy or two, and the vitriolic abuse he received from Chelsea fans, he scored some key goals to get them to that Europa League final and that Champions League final. The way Chelsea fans treat some of their players is disgusting. Chelsea fans are as a whole collective, they're a classless bunch, and they're a classless club as well, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of Chelsea. The way the whole Diego Costa thing was handled by both the club and the player was a shambles. Serves Chelsea right, to be honest. Personally, I'm not a big Chelsea fan. And that's my personal opinion. Do I dislike individual Chelsea players? No. Do I have friends who are Chelsea fans? Yes. But as a whole, the club comes across as a very classless organisation. And there is a minority of fans at Chelsea that, yes, Morientes played for Liverpool for a brief period and he was never fit. He did play at Liverpool in the early 2000s under Gerard Houllier, and he could never stay fit. By the time Benitez came along, he was already out the door. He had a lot of injuries, did Morientes, which was a shame because he was a very talented player. But his time at Liverpool, he was just crippled by injuries. It's the same with Diego Forlan at Man United. He never settled in at Man United, but in Spain, he just lit it up. And for Uruguay, he lit it up. But when he was playing at Man United, at the same time, didn't score enough goals. World-class player. But Morientes was at that time in Spanish football when they were developing all these good players, but they couldn't win an international tournament. Their club sides, again, were as they are now, the politics was dividing the game in Spain. And then suddenly, for a 10-year period, they decided to put all the politics of Spanish football aside. They decided to unite everyone, get the Basques, the Catalans, the Andalusians, everyone playing under the Spanish banner for Spain. And that's now gone out the window again. So they've had that 10-year period of good, and now they're going to be, as an international side, a shadow of their former selves. They're just, it's going to be a shambles of Spanish football again. So, yay. But the plans for La Liga to play games in the US is now FIFA is saying that shouldn't happen. So I think La Liga are going to find themselves in deep hot water. That could affect how the Champions League and Europa League are played out. Is there sanctions against Spanish clubs in Europe? Because we've seen English clubs in Europe get banned from playing in European competition because of the hooligan element. If Spain and La Liga wants to go down this forcing through this game, could UEFA go, we're banning you from European competition? Mendieta, I think, was towards the end of his career by that point. Brilliant player, end of his career by the time he joined Borough. Juninho had 2 spells, but they were not in good Borough sides. At the time he came along, Middlesbrough were not a good side. They weren't consistent. They had money issues. They broke the bank getting him. He is a cult figure up there. He is well loved in Teesside. But when Mendieta got to Middlesbrough, he was towards the end of his career. When Juninho first went, they weren't a good side. When he came the second time, they weren't a good side. And it just didn't work out for them. Mendieta was a good player, though. I think he did show a lot of good flashes of brilliance at Middlesbrough. He was at the end of his career, and he wanted to go there just to experience the Premier League. I think he wanted to experience the Premier League, challenge himself in that sense. He did that, and he was a brilliant player, and he was a good servant for Middlesbrough. I just do think that he was at the end of his career when he came to English football. Juninho, he's a brilliant player, ultimately skillful, but very, very slight, very small. The physicality of the Premier League at the time he was playing in the 90s, the pitches were different, the physicality was different, the style of game was different. More English players, more big burly centre backs kicking the lumps out of him. But Middlesbrough back then just were not a good side, and that's my personal opinion. Middlesbrough just really were struggling at the time he came. They couldn't stay up, and they considered the quickest goal in FA Cup history to Roberto Di Matteo at the old Wembley. And they were already relegated by that point. You could say Italy, South Korea as well in that World Cup as well was a little bit suspicious. We have discussed match fixing before, and there is a big issue in Asia with match fixing. In Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, China. You name any India, you name any team in subcontinental, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia or Pacific Asia, there is match fixing allegations and scandals that come straight in with it. That whole World Cup was a bit suspicious with the South Korean run that they had. Japan, they were a decent side. That's regularly their ceiling is to get to the second round. So they were within expectations. South Korea, going as far as they did, they've shown nothing since of the same level, not even close. They showed nothing before, even close. So yes, there is a suspicion and a bit of a whiff of the Italy-South Korea game as well is another one that's very much highlighted. Obviously, being 12, 13 years old at the time, you don't think so much of it as a kid, thinking anything untoward. But looking back now, as someone who's nearly 29, and you look back at what happened, 16 years ago, yeah, South Korea have shown nothing before and nothing since that would warrant getting to that stage of a World Cup. Absolutely not even close. And we can discuss match fixing as much as we want. There is a big issue with not just football match fixing, but match fixing and spot fixing in a variety of sports. And a lot of it comes from Asian criminal gangs. They've worked out that drugs and prostitution is getting a bit more difficult to commit those crimes, so they've gone into the betting world, and they've got into legitimate and illegitimate betting. And yeah, that is an issue that is within sport right now that isn't going away. When Trapattoni is coming out, and bearing in mind, Italy's had its own match fixing scandals in the 1980s and 2006 and onwards. When Trapattoni's coming out and going, that game was the most fixed game, and in his press conference was very scathing, that says something. And what we now know about FIFA and UEFA and CONCACAF and the various governing bodies of the regionally and FIFA with the corruption there, with corrupt betting to bidding to get World Cups, absolutely. The amount of scandals that have come out in Greek football, Turkish football, Brazilian football, Argentinian, Italian, Spanish, German, there are match fixing allegations of a variety of leagues, internationals, and competitions. But when a manager comes out and says, "Yeah, no, that game was on the dodge," to be fair, that Italian side was pretty poor in 2002. I'm not going to lie, they didn't perform well at all. So I'm not holding back there. That Italian team wasn't great, and I don't think they did deserve to get to the next round. But when the coach is coming out, a coach of Trapattoni standing within the game saying there was something dodgy with that game, that highlights all the problems within the anti-corruption unit at FIFA at World Cups, and highlights a lot because Blatter was obsessed about getting a World Cup in Asia. He got that. They went back to Germany. There's allegations about the bidding process for the Germany World Cup, and Beckenbauer has been linked to some illegal deals to get the World Cup in Germany. But that World Cup was pretty good. There wasn't any games there that I thought were backhanded, personally. But then he was obsessed about getting the World Cup in South Africa, and there's allegations of corruption of both match fixing and dodginess there. And then the World Cup in Brazil. He was again, let's take it back to the Maracanã. And England again had bid for all these tournaments and was screwed out of them. So yeah, the anti-corruption unit at FIFA was already being questioned because of the corrupt dealings of FIFA. So the sport itself has got issues, and when key figures in the game are saying, "Hang on a second, this is wrong," and bear in mind the Italian league is known for being, dodgy with match fixing scandals and betting scandals and spot fixing scandals, and the link of the mafia in sport over in Italy. When a guy like Trapattoni is feeling comfortable enough to come out and say that game felt fixed to me, that referee was clearly bribed, or making allegations of that, yeah, it says a lot about the state of the game. Oh, but why would the Italian mafia want Italy to lose? Because it is the national sport, and Italians are mad for their football. You want to win, and the Italian mafia and the Yakuza triads kind of they do have other dealings that isn't match fixing, and it's called heroin, and large amounts of it, and people smuggling and gun smuggling and contraband smuggling. And I can look at that on the other channel. I've looked at the Italian Maxi trial that led to so many people in the Italian and American mafias and other organized crime groups getting indicted, because it came out that it was far more widespread than people wanted to believe. And yes, the betting syndicates would have obviously wanted Italy to win. And when it comes to football, for the most part, the mafia don't get involved in match fixing. They do occasionally. It backfires, and they're like, "It's not worth it." They would rather Italy win. When it comes to football, they own some of the football clubs. They don't want to lose because it makes Italian football look bad. But yeah, no, there's a lot of organised crime involvement in football. The anti-corruption bodies are just not doing their job. This is known. And again, this is on the hearsay. I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, there were threats to the officials. There were threats to people involved in the game. But sport and organised crime has a long history dating back to before 1900. Long history between criminals and sport. We've seen it in horse racing, we've seen it in boxing, we've seen it in football, we've seen it in other sports. There is an unfortunate link between criminals and sport, be it with ownership of teams or threats against officials and then players, etc., etc. There is an unfortunate link there because sport is so lucrative, and has so much money in the game. That's where it comes in. There is that much money involved in not just football, but in global sporting competition. That organised criminals are never far away, and match fixers are never far away, because it's an easy way to make money that is actually non-violent. If you know what I mean, there's no real violence between the criminal. There's no. It's not. It's a harmless crime. It's almost like a victimless crime in a sense because no actual violence has taken place. The threat of violence may have taken place, but it's an easy money earner because how can you prove that criminal organisation is the one controlling this betting syndicate? Yes, he was. He was a Sicilian. He came from a very, very poor rural background. He couldn't read or write I think he was illiterate. I think he couldn't read or write properly. Which is why he got screwed out of a lot of his money as well. He played professional football, yes. Squillaci, he had not the best education. He was from a very poor farming background, rural background in Sicily. Couldn't read or write properly, and when he became professional, when he became this star player in the 90s, he got screwed out of a lot of his money by his agent. He was left. He didn't get treated properly by the people who were going to look after him. But yeah, he was a Sicilian, and that helped unite the regions of Italy a little bit with a Sicilian player doing so well for the national side. Because there is a regional divide between north and south, and the regions of Italy as well. As someone who's lived out there and spent a lot of time in Italy, there is a regional divide between north and south, and then the other regions within that. He became a star player, and it was an uplifting moment at Italia 90 having him play so well. Considering his background and the poverty he came from, because people forget, Italy is a westernized country, but there are parts of Italy that are exceptionally poor. And back then, when he would have been growing up in the 50s, there wasn't running water in every household. There wasn't electricity to every household. World War II left southern Italy destroyed, where he's from, flattened. And also there were issues with on the political side of things between north and south, and the mafia, and then there was the years of lead, which is a known period where for 25 years the mafia, the far right, the far left, and the government were killing each other. There was bombings, there was assassinations, there was two mafia wars. So he was brought up at a time when in Italy there was a lot of social upheaval. You had the end of fascism, the end of the monarchy. You had unstable Republican governments. You had big issues with the mafia, basically having open warfare between the various, the Camorra, the Sicilian mafia, the 'Ndrangheta, the mafia from Apulia, and southern Italy was just a bloodbath. And there was assassinations in Milan, and they had public officials getting murdered and bombs going off. So it's much like the UK during the Troubles in Northern Ireland and the mainland bombing campaign by the IRA and the Loyalists for 20, 30 years. Between the 1960s and the 1990s, both in Italy, in UK, in France, in Germany, in Greece, there was a lot of far-right and hard-left terrorist groups leaving car bombs, assassinating officials, and organised criminals were involved in that. And that's the background that people like Squillaci were brought up in. And if you are old enough to remember the Manchester bombing in '98, when the IRA decided to blow up Manchester City Centre, which is why we have the Manchester Arena built to replace the building that they blew up, which then got bombed again, which is just... There was the Bologna train station bombing. So if you want to hear about, you think what happened in 2005 on 7/7 was bad on public transport, you should listen and read up on the Bologna train bombing, and the death toll there was horrific. You had ETA in Spain, you had November 17 in Greece, political assassinations. You had the Corsican separatists and the Corsican mafia leaving car bombs and pipe bombs on the police officers' cars. You had the Kurdish PPK in Germany going around assassinating German Turks. So Mesut Ozil was being brought up at a time when his family would have been targeted by Kurdish separatists because of his Turkish origin. There's 2 million Turks in Germany, and their community was being targeted by the Kurdish community. So yeah, Europe between the 60s and the 90s wasn't necessarily the nicest place to live, and people forget about this. And Squillaci was one of those people brought up in that time and was playing football at a time of great social backdrop of these issues, and a lot of it politically. It's really interesting, and this is something for the other channel, but it's really interesting, and people tend to forget this is what was happening 20 odd years ago. I mean, I've done a video on the Maxi trial on the other channel, and when Squillaci was playing for Italy in that World Cup in 1990, there was the Maxi trial taking place, or the aftermath of it, and it was a big drive by the Italian government to basically root out not just the Sicilian mafia or the Neapolitan Camorra, but the 'Ndrangheta in Calabria, and then you had the other mafias in Puglia and Basilica. Basically, in the south of Italy, south of Rome, there's a lot of mafia groups, and they were trying to root them all out and put them on trial and put them in prison. And in 1992, they decided to blow up a motorway bridge with Falcone on it. And I've been over that motorway bridge, and I've seen the monument, and the mafia were killing people. and that was a big concern security wise going into that World Cup. Was yeah, the mafia war that was going on, and the years of lead, and the political violence between the hard left and the far right, and the bombings and the assassinations, and that was a big concern. So yeah, that's a little backstory to Salvatore Squillaci, I suppose, and the time that he was playing, and the fact that there were a lot of social issues, not just in Italy but in across Western Europe at the time, and the build up to that tournament. And then obviously we saw after that tournament the collapse of the former Yugoslavia, and some of the issues that have happened there that have carried on. So there are some really wide social implications of that period of time. But no, it's interesting that we got a bit off topic there. But that's where sport and society are so closely linked. And when he was playing at his best, it did. Oh no, Italy's immensely interesting. You've not just got the Sicilian Mafia, you've got the Neapolitan Camorra, you have the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta, you have the Sacrete Uno in Puglia, which is the other side, on the Adriatic side. You have mafia groups in Basilica, which is the arch of the foot, if you want to call it that, the boot bit. The southern half of Italy, south of Rome, is the mafia isn't as big as people think it is, but it is an element to society, the organised criminal element. There are criminal groups also in north of Italy as well that, would you call them mafia? Probably not. But Italy as a country has only been a country, much like Germany, since the 1860s. Italy and Germany were unified as countries only 150 odd years ago, 160 odd years ago. So they haven't been around that long. And people tend to forget that they're only, in real terms, as national identity, pretty young compared to France and the UK and the Scandinavian countries. Their national identity isn't really there. They haven't had a unified kind of government for very long. There is a dark side to Italy. There is a dark side to, in fact, a lot of Europe with terrorism. And the darkest point is the 1960s to the 1990s, and basically up till September the 11th. You had groups like ETA, you had groups like the IRA and the UDA, the Ulster Defence Association, the Older Defence League, the Red Hand. You had the real IRA, their provision. So you had the Republican and Loyalist groups in Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, and the rest of the UK. You had ETA in Spain, which is the Basque separatists. You had the Corsican separatists in Corsica in France. You obviously had the Red Brigades, and then the far right paramilitary groups in Italy. You had the same in Germany as well, left and far right groups planting bombs. Same in the UK, there's some far right groups as well. You've had some, in Greece, November 17, they're a paramilitary group. Golden Dawn were once a fully paramilitary terrorist organisation. Now they're a political party. So Greece has had it. You've got the PPK in Turkey and across Europe. People forget that for this 30-year period, it wasn't just the UK going through left-wing and right-wing terrorism. It was the whole of Western Europe, what is now the western half of the EU. There were bombs going off all over the place. There were assassinations all over the place. And Italy is one of those countries which gets overlooked when they call it the years of lead. It is a terrifying period. And I actually spent some of my formative years out in Italy during the end of the years of lead, part one, when Falcone was blown up. My aunt, I was in northern Italy. I mean, I've been over that motorway bridge, and you can see where they've replaced the section which was blown up, and you can see the monument to Salvatore Falcone, where he was sort of vaporized by a massive roadside bomb that left a good 50-meter crater in the ground. And yes, the sectarian side of things, this is the issue, and I mentioned this last night, and Scottish football and football as a whole, because it's not just Scotland that has this issue. It's not just England, or it's not just the UK or Ireland. It's across Europe. There is this issue of cultural and sectarian and religious and ethnic divide, and it happens in the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavian countries. It happens. In France with the Sicilia, with the Corsican clubs in the French league system. It happens in Italy with the Sicilian and Sardinian clubs. It does happen also with the regionals of Italy. It happens in Spain. It happens not so much in Germany on that kind of things, but there is an issue in Germany between hard left and far right. So St. Pauli and Hamburg hate each other because one's right wing, one's left wing, and they regularly try and kill each other in Hamburg. Now they're back in the same league again. It's going to be fun for the Hamburg police department. You see it you see it in some leagues more than others, and football really needs to get a grip on racist and sectarian, and political violence associated with clubs, because there's also a political front to it as well. Um, I am surprised though if you go. I saw a Hearts fan the other night who's lived down here for many years, and he says his dad's a Hibs fan, he's a Hearts fan. And I said, "What's the sectarianism like in Edinburgh?" Because I have come across Scottish football fans who do mention that there is a mild undercurrent. It's mostly the old firm, but there is a sectarian element to Hibs Hearts. It's just not as bad as the old firm. Oh yeah, Olympiacos, Panathinaikos. One's working class and royalist, or something, and one's upper class. One's working class and communist, and one's more middle and upper class, and wants the and has a royalist kind of right wing background. And yeah, it's nasty. Panathinaikos are more, I think, royalist or right wing, and Olympiacos are more left wing communist. It's to do with World War II. It's to do with the aftermath of Greece having a civil war. There's other clubs in Athens as well. It's more than just Panathinaikos and Olympiacos. You've got AEK. You've got AOK. They get really nasty, and some of them have paramilitary leanings. It's brutal. And then you've got in Turkey, it's just as bad as well. There is a hatred that I've not seen in a long time that's bubbling again in European football. We saw it 2 years ago at the Euros with the Russians wanting to take on the Western world. We didn't see so much this summer, and I think because I think FIFA put pressure on the Russian authorities to not have what happened at Euro 2016 happen, and a lot of the hooligans have links to the government and the various armed forces, and they were told behave or punishment will come. But no, there is a rising undercurrent within football, and to some extent rugby league as well. There is that little bubbling hatred there, and it's still there. I think football as a big sport could do a hell of a lot more, but they don't. Oh God, Roma and Lazio. Yeah, there is a problem there. Lazio do have strong links with Benito Mussolini, and then the rise of fascism in Italy in the 1920s. There is a massive issue with some. It's like Livorno, who and La Spezia, who obviously are Tuscan teams. They have very more communist leaning because they were north of the front lines, so to speak. They were in the German occupied part of Italy after the collapse of Benito Mussolini's government in 1943, and the communist partisans basically that was some of their hot regions of operations. So they are more left wing in their leaning, and Lazio is more right wing in its leaning. The south of Italy is a bit more, we're proud of our town, our city, and actually would like to see the return of the monarchy, ironically enough. And they're more conservative in their leanings, but they're not like hard fascists. They don't like fascism down there, so they are more regional. But Italian hooligans are just vile human beings, as we've seen in the Champions League and Europa League with some of their hooligans. They show you how to fight. But no, football as a sport needs to do a lot more to combat these issues of racism, homophobia, and sectarianism and political violence. It needs to do a hell of a lot more. It doesn't, because money talks, and they fear losing out on all that revenue that they can get. So they've boxed themselves into a corner. A lot of these clubs at the top table, when they have the UEFA meetings and the Champions League and Europa League meetings and those kind of off-season meetings between the presidents of clubs, a lot of these clubs have a lot of weight when it comes to the European game, and we shall see. On the Spain side of things, with the La Liga plans to take games to the US, it's very surprising that they've chosen two Catalan clubs to do it, in Barcelona and Girona. So I'm also seeing some politics being played there. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of sanctioned, because La Liga clearly going to go ahead with this. They're not backing down from the agreement. The rest of the football world is against them. I could see Spanish clubs being frozen out of the Champions League and Europa League as punishment, which could actually be harmful for Spanish football going forward. I think Spanish football's at a crossroads here, and they could find themselves as an isolated league, and it could lead to the end of the Champions League and Europa League as we know it, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But the players are threatening to go on strikes. Does that mean all Spanish players around the world go on strike in protest as supporting their national brethren? Because there's a lot of Spanish players playing around Europe who are registered to play for Spain. Does that mean all the other Spanish players in the other leagues around Europe and North America as well, because there's a lot of Spanish players who are eligible to play for Spain playing in the MLS, does that mean they decide to go, we're not playing until this is resolved? Because the Spanish Players Union that cover La Liga players and players playing in Spain has come out and said we'll go on strike. Does that mean Spanish players outside of Spain get to go on strike? So that's a big thing there. And football hasn't had to come across this before, so we'll see how UEFA and FIFA, as the main governing bodies of the sport, plus the other federations in Europe, deal with that, because this could really blow out of control and get political very, very quickly, and Spanish football could find itself isolated from the rest of Europe when it comes to European club competition, which may be good for the Champions League, may be terrible for the Champions League, but, we shall see. But yes, Tacania doing the fascist signs, I think he rightly got a lot of crap for that. And Tacania's got a fascist tattoo as well. He made when his mother was buried, he made a fascist salute there. There are concerns that Di Canio has got links to the old fascist party and fascist groups, which is semi-legal. It's a tricky area. I mean, fascism and Nazism and the National Socialism is illegal to have those symbols. But because the fascist symbol was actually based on the old Roman imperial symbol, it's kind of, there's a loophole in having those kind of tattoos and posters and flags. But yeah, there are concerns that some players are exceptionally political and have right-wing leanings in Italian football. There is that concern. A lot of fan bases have that concern. It's an undercurrent in Italian football, is the battle between the communists and the fascists in Italian football circles. Even though they're minority parties, and the Communist Party's got some following in parts of Italy, but there is a concern that Mussolini's granddaughter's in the Italian parliament, for Christ's sake, so they haven't fully distanced themselves from the far right, and there is a concern that the hard left far right in European politics are now using things like football to recruit thugs, basically. So there's that. But racism in European football is far more prevalent than it is in the English game. So when players are complaining of racist chanting at English league games or British league games, it's far worse on the continent. It's far worse in France and Italy and Spain than it is here. Germany, it's rampant. And UEFA would rather we didn't talk about that, because apparently it's an English problem, racism and homophobia and sexism in sport. No, it's a European problem, but they would rather blame us for all the ills of European football and say we're the root cause of it when we're not. But yeah. But no, it's interesting because there are the social side of it, and sport is a representation of how a nation or a region of a nation or part of a nation is doing socially. Sport is the representation of that. So when you see homophobia or racism in society, it comes out in the sports fan base, because sport is the representation of your society from your fan base. And I heard people complain about the national anthem at the rugby league at the weekend between England and New Zealand, saying that those choirs were not representative. Or no, what was it? Was it not? No, it was the NFL. Sorry, not the rugby league. There were people online saying that choir was not representative of the modern UK. Well, hang on a second. You had the American school kids choir, all white kids. Is that representative of America? No. Are they two youth choirs? Yes. Does it matter? No. But there's people whinging that this is not representative of society. These are kids singing in front of 80,000 people. Give them some respect. So there is also that as well. Oh, Graham Souness doesn't have a clue about what's going on in Turkey. Fenerbahce and Galatasaray hate each other. Um, you know, Turkish football is really terrifying. There is a real hatred. It's gang related. It's more than just hooligans. It is pure gang related. They for some reason any other day of the week, it's fine. It comes to match day, and half of Istanbul wants to kill each other. It's there's about 9 teams in Istanbul. Um, they all hate each other. There's a lot of politics behind that as well. There is gang mafia connections there as well. It's Turkey and football is real toxic environment. Um, there are some Turkic, Greek, Turkic, Bulgarian. So there's some ethnicity in there as well. It really is not a pretty sight. But this is the issue with football, and football needs to confront these issues head on. It needs to tackle the rise in violence and the links between really abhorrent political and criminal groups that have used football as a recruiting ground for their thugs. This has always been the case. Some rather nasty political and gang and criminal related groups do go to sport to find those fans that like having a bit of the old punch up and the thuggery, and they recruit them. And they use this as a means of recruiting some really, really nasty individuals to then go on into organised crime or into political related terrorism, etc. It's a fermented kind of recruiting ground of angry youth, and yeah. So sport and football needs to root this kind of crap out, and the authorities need to root this kind of crap out as well, because I thought we left this shit behind 20 years ago. We haven't. It's still there. It's on the rise again, and it has been for a while. And the hooligans and the thugs and the gangs and the criminals, they don't care. They don't care. But it is what it is. Oh yeah, no, the power of Putin. I've seen various documentaries about Russia in the last couple of years, and the sporting side of Russia and the political side of Russia, and other bits and pieces. There's been a lot of documentaries. There's been a lot of news coverage. There is a bias in the media here in the West, anti-Russian bias. So there is a lot going on. I've seen a lot of documentaries about Vladimir Putin. There was a lot of documentaries in the build up to the World Cup, done by various channels and presenters. It is interesting how he is so closely tied with so many sports teams, primarily from St. Petersburg. There was allegations that he's tried to fix the KHL in the favour of SKA St. Petersburg. There are allegations he's tried to fix the Russian league in the favour of Zenit St. Petersburg. There are a lot of allegations that if a sports team is from St. Petersburg, he's going to be trying to fix that league in their favour. Doesn't always work, though, because his second team is CSKA. So there are strong links between the Kremlin and sport. And yet there are a lot of people who believe, he is, quite dark and evil inside. He used to work for the KGB, so you've got to be a bit of a tough bastard, if I'm honest. He's ex-KGB, so that says something about, his background. But again, there is an anti-Russia bias at the moment in the Western media. Take some of the things that are said in these documentaries with a pinch of salt. However, there is a lot of truth in what has been broadcast over the last, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years about Vladimir Putin and the Russian state. And there is an anti-Putin movement in Russia as well. But again, take some of the things that are reported in these documentaries with a pinch of salt, because there is an anti-Russian bias. Yes, he did meet Khabib's parents and himself at the Kremlin after the UFC 229. Again, because Habib is a Russian, but he's from Dagestan, and that is more political than just sport. Dagestan is very, very close to Chechnya, and of course, the Russian-Chechnya war. There's parts of the Caucasus that want to become separate countries. Chechnya is one of them. Dagestan is pro-Russian because it gets a lot of money from the Russian government. Chechnya wanted to be separate, or parts of Chechnya want to be separate. There's been 2 Chechen wars. There's been allegations of ethnic cleansing. We've seen the Beslan school siege in the first time Putin was president before Medvedev came along. There's obviously been, when Medvedev was president, when Putin was prime minister, which is allegations of puppet presidency. There was a war in Georgia and South Ossetia, which is another region of the Caucasus. It's that part of the Russian Federation is a hot topic. It's primarily Islamic population. About 70% of it, the faith is Islam. There is significant Georgian and Armenian minorities as well, which they don't have the same church as the Russians, and they also hate the Russians as well. So there is a lot going on in that part of the world because Habib is from Dagestan, which is pro-Russia, pro-Kremlin. A lot of Dagestanis were used to go into Chechnya and South Ossetia and, well, kill or murder those who were anti-regime as paramilitaries. And they were funded by the Russian government to go in and basically kill Chechen separatists. And then the Chechen separatists did send a lot of people to Afghanistan to fight with the Taliban. They sent a lot of people to Bosnia to fight against the Serbs. So there's a big geopolitical thing between them. Chechnya or Muslim, there is state censorship on certain websites, so you have to find a way around Russian state control of the media. I find watching RT really, really funny, though. The Russian television news channel over here in the UK. I do find watching RT News quite funny because they do have an anti-Western bias as well. It's kind of funny watching the other side of the propaganda. It is kind of funny. Some of the news articles they do have are kind of interesting, but I find RT kind of like a break from Sky News and BBC News crap that we have over here. Watching RT is kind of funny. I don't take it seriously. I just find it kind of funny to watch how another country's state-run broadcaster. I find it kind of funny and kind of like a change of scene because they don't go with the same rhetoric that the BBC seems to. The BBC is just a propaganda arm. The BBC is RT. Our version of RT. The BBC is our version of RT because it's a state-run organisation. It's state media. Fox is just a joke because they don't report anything else than crap. Sky News is starting to bang the right-wing drum now and become more anti-Labour Party. The BBC is just a laughing stock. To be honest, it's kind of interesting how we've got onto the media now, but the media has a responsibility in growing sport, if I can get back to that. But no, it's interesting. I mean, I could do live streams on the other channel about all this stuff, and we could discuss, the what's going on geopolitically in the world. But no, there is censorship. There is a lot of state control of the media. If you speak out, you end up dead in Russia. If you are an opposition politician, you end up accidentally dying outside the Kremlin. Fox Sports, yes, I will give Fox Sports, especially in Australia, I will give Fox News. Fox in Australia is different to Fox in the US, I will give it that. I have seen some Fox Sports broadcasts. Their sports coverage is pretty good around the world when it comes to Fox Sports. They do have some good sports coverage, I will say that. They need to separate the sport from the rest of the network because I feel that the sports coverage is being sullied by the rest of the Fox network and the right-wing drum that they're banging. And I feel sorry for sports fans. But some of these neoliberal, whiny snowflakes are targeting Fox presenters with death threats. They're sports presenters. This is sport. Sport is a great social equaliser. So some of these loony left and off. It's my personal opinion. They can fuck off. I think Fox Sports is decent. I do feel sorry for them because of the news arm and the programming, so the television program, like the comedies or the drama programs that are made for Fox TV channels, there is a right wing undercurrent to it. Fox in Australia and New Zealand is rugby league, a bit of Super Rugby. AFL is about equal with rugby league. There is a bit of mighty sport, and that's it. It depends, I think, on where you are in Australia and New Zealand. But I have been told that it is rugby league, AFL, bit of rugby union, and then other sports like the V8 supercars, and then after that, it's drips and drabs of other bits and pieces. But you got to look at the two biggest sports in Australia are AFL and the NRL. So you can see why they're hammering the that kind of market. UFC is obviously, we've mentioned UFC, they're in hot water constantly, and you have mentioned before that UFC and MMA as a sport may also be banned from Australia again, and I don't think UFC 229 and 223 have helped UFC's or MMA's cause, and Conor McGregor is involved in both incidents. Khabib is involved in both incidents, so there is that kind of concern. And again, politically, Dana White did a video on him. He's come out in support of Donald Trump, and Trump's links with Putin are there. So yeah, UFC has a big political link as well. It is what it is. I understand that obviously Fox still being owned by Murdoch is rubbing some up the wrong way. He's now lost control of Sky over here in the UK, which could be a positive. We'll have to wait and see on how positive that outcome actually is long term. But I think if we look at what Conor McGregor did in New York and what Khabib did in Vegas, UFC completely lost control of its athletes. I think both of them deserve some prison time. Well, Dana White's got links to Donald Trump. He's come out in 2016 when Trump was going for the election and has, backed Trump. And Khabib is got links to Putin, so there is a political link with UFC with some of its star fighters and the promotion. It has come out. Obviously, Putin's got murky links with the boxing and UFC and MMA. There is a political link there. The fact that Khabib won in UFC 229 goes against the anti-Russian narrative that the mainstream media across the Western world has been pumping out for the last couple of years since Trump decided to go for the presidency, and the Ukraine crisis in 2014, because of the anti-Russian rhetoric that the Western media has been pumping out on a daily basis for 4 or 5 years. When a Russian wins something, they're automatically accusing of match fixing, doping, all this bollocks, and it didn't go in the narrative that the media wanted. It didn't. UFC, I think, is killing itself with how it's been run. Personally, I think UFC is killing itself long term. It needs structural reform. It needs cleaning up. The other promotions, such as Bellator, are going under the radar because they don't have this carnage associated with them. They're much better run, and they're making less money, but they're not so controversial. And eventually, is controversy, going to sell all the time? Yes, World Rugby has its YouTube channel. NASCAR has a YouTube channel where you can see whole races replayed in full. There's lower levels of rugby league in Australia on Bar TV Sports. It all depends on copyright. If a sport is willing to, if a sports governing body or a sport itself or a league itself is willing to have games free to air on streaming services, then yes, there's no copyright violation because they're the ones filming it, they're the ones streaming it or showing it. So we've seen Elite League Ice Hockey streamed on YouTube and other streaming sites. It's a matter of time, I think, before a mainstream sports company puts an entire season on YouTube. We've seen it with BT Sport trying with the Champions League and Europa League finals, and their coverage is shit, so I don't care. Fox Italia is partnered with Sky Italia. They're basically the same company. They're just the different channels. One will show Sky TV products. One will show Fox US TV shows. Fox Italia is crap. Sky Italia is much better. And that's still technically owned by Murdoch, which is a problem. Al Jazeera stopped showing on Freeview, its news channel. It has lesser news coverage now on Sky. There are political issues with that. News China is state sponsored. France 24, these are all state sponsored, apart from Fox Italia companies. And state controlled media is a worrying thing. You got CNN, who I wouldn't rate as a news broadcaster because their news is all secondhand, out of date. There's quite a few 24-hour news channels out there. You got CNN, you got Al Jazeera, you got RT, you have Fox, you have Sky, you have BBC. There are other ones as well floating around. But again, the TV rights for sport are interesting. That's a big debating point right now. A lot more of the 18 to 34 age demographic don't want to pay for subscription TV. They're turning off subscription TV. I can see YouTube or other streaming sites where it's free and accessible being the way. They're not even really paying. Amazon Prime and Fire TV and things like that and Now TV, they're not getting the numbers they would like. They're getting some viewers, yes. They're not getting the numbers they would want. Yes, Bloomberg, ABC News, yep, they are broadcasters as well. But no, these TV streaming services, they're not getting the customer numbers they would actually expected when they launched. So I can see YouTube and Twitch getting more sports rights free to air, just stream it that way. And then when the stream is ended, when they replay the video, they get the ad rights that way. I can see that being more of or full match replays being shown 6 hours after the event, being shown on YouTube and Twitch. I can see them going down this route. I can see some leagues deciding this is a better idea to get the products out there. Younger people are not willing to pay the subscription or the pay-per-view anymore. They're just not, and it's a growing trend, and they've got to adapt. So either all these sports companies that have the TV rights go free to air completely, much like what Premier Sports have realised with free sports, or their prices go up and people go, we're going to stream illegally, which is happening more and more. People are just not willing to pay. They've reached a point now where wages aren't growing fast enough to warrant paying subscription TV fees, and they're not happy. And they're coming up with all these fancy ideas, trying to keep people interested, like putting Netflix on Sky TV here in the UK as of the 1st November. I don't think people are buying into it. So there you go. There was an issue with the World Cup. I remember you mentioning when the Football World Cup was on in Australia with the streaming service being crap. So the free-to-air channels picked it up, which it should have been in the first place. Yeah, TV rights for international tournaments are a big talking point. I think the biggest one coming up is the Cricket World Cup, and I think that's on Sky, and people are unhappy with that. People are very unhappy with that. Chance to really grow the sport in the UK again, get some more fans into it. And yeah, they've gone with the subscription TV, which hasn't gone down well at all. But yeah, I mean, we could discuss the Rugby League international between England and New Zealand at Hull having a half-empty stadium. I sometimes to be able to give the coverage I can to so many sports, I have to find ways to watch without paying because I refuse to pay Sky or BT Sport stupid amounts of money for a really poor product. Yeah, BT Sport in Scotland is the only way to get Scottish sport. It is the only way. Unless you are supporting a team south of the border in any sport, BT Sport have got far too much of the Scottish sporting rights, and BT Sport is struggling. And I wouldn't be surprised if BT Sport does go bust within the next 5 years because BT customers, me included, are not willing to support with our bills. We are refusing to pay. BT is losing customers because of BT Sport. BT Sport is being propped up by the internet and mobile phone side of BT's business, and BT customers are not happy and are switching to other providers, and it's killing BT Sport. Yeah, Setanta. It's going to be another ITV Sports Setanta failure, and Setanta has had a massive knock-on effect for Scottish football for the last decade. If and when BT Sport does die, which it will, the knock-on effect for English football isn't as bad. They can survive. They made enough money in the last 2 decades to, I think, be fine. Scottish football, no, that's could be the death knell for the Scottish Premier League as we know it, and Scottish football as we know it could be done. The weather's got really bad. Oh, there's some dark clouds. It's trying to snow. It is actually trying to snow where I am. Possibly, yeah, a bit of rain, definitely trying to snow. It's cold enough. But no, Setanta was a massive gamble, and the Scottish leagues signed up for it stupidly. It wasn't even a British company; it was an Irish company. It survived 2 years and went down the toilet. BT Sport's going the same way. The reason why BT Sport has survived so long is because it's backed up by a massive company and it's partnered with EE as well. So EE and BT Mobile are partners. The internet provider, BT TV in general, is crap. But yeah, BT Sport only survives because it is propped up by, a bigger company. BT are losing 230 million a year on BT Sport. They won't tolerate losing that much money for much longer. Setanta, they used to cover the AFL because Setanta was an Irish company. A lot of Gaelic football players are now playing Aussie rules football, and there is a link between AFL and amateur association, Gaelic amateur association football, Gaelic football. There's a lot of Irish players playing in the AFL right now. There is a link. There is a fan base. There is a strong link there. That's why they used to cover it. Yes, there is meant to be on the continent right now, in Europe right now, it's October. There are blizzards. So there's a sudden, with the cold temperatures coming from the north and winds coming from the east, Central Europe is covered in snow right now. Heavy snow in the Alps. We are expected to possibly get some on the eastern half of the UK. And I live in the southeast. I'm only just west of London. So yes, we could have heavy snowfall in the next few days or weeks. This has been, it is a concern. If you're living in the west of the UK right now, it is cold, but you're not near the weather front. If you live in the eastern half of the UK, so if you draw a line on the middle of England and Scotland and anything to the east of that, you're likely to possibly get snow. And the Thames Valley is weirdly shaped where I live, and we get heavier snow than, let's say, Hampshire would 15 miles down the road. We really do get it regionally as well. A bit early in the year for snow, but we had a late flurry in winter. We've had a very weird year for weather this year. So I might have to film the snow when it does come out the sky on my phone or iPad, and then upload that to YouTube. Going, here's the crap coming out the sky, which I did this winter on the main channel. I did film all the snowfall and go. I was surprised by how late it came and how heavy it came. There is a chance of snow anywhere on the eastern side. Scotland could get it all over, but then as you go down through England and into Wales and the Midlands, there is a chance with the North Sea coast side of things, and inland by some distance could get a fair whack. And I'm looking out the window now, and it's not looking promising. It's not looking promising. And the real concerning thing is the foliage, the trees, the deciduous trees haven't lost a lot of their leaves yet. So there's a lot of trees still heavy in leaf, and if it does snow, that extra weight will bring trees down, will bring branches down, will be kind of dangerous. People tend to forget that. It's still October. It's not even November yet, and we've got threats of snow on the horizon. So we could have a very, very bad winter. And this is another concern when it comes to, should the Premier League have a winter break? Should they play the season more in the summer and have a winter break for a couple of weeks to a month? This is one of the reasons why people are saying Scottish football should go to the summer and play a summer league. This is why rugby league got moved to the summer, partly to allow pitches to recover because they've also been used for football and rugby union. This is why the Super League is a summer league now, partly to link it up to Australia as well. But there are talks of moving some of the leagues more into the summer. But yeah, no, there is a threat of some really bad weather coming. I'm not sure if everyone's fully prepared for it either because it's so early in the year. In the seasons, if you know what I mean. We haven't really had an autumn yet. It's been reasonably decent weather this autumn, so we could have a real shit bag of weather. But that can affect sport, and it's how sport is affected by it. Because we saw the winter just gone, the snow, the bad snow came a lot later in the winter, in between February and April rather than earlier, and that decimated Scottish football and English football as well. Absolutely decimated football and rugby, completely decimated it. So it will be interesting to see if it does snow, what effect that would have on matches in November and December, because from what I'm looking out there, those clouds don't look promising. It's not meant to rain or snow today, but it's looking like it's giving it a go. And oh god, I live in a place called Bracknell. My mate lives in a town 9 miles up the road called Maidenhead. I ride up there when he's not working in the evenings because I'm in between jobs at the moment. I ride up there on my motorbike, and it may not be that cold, but when I leave. But let's say I leave his house anywhere between 11 and 3 in the morning, something like that, right? My bike is frozen solid. There is ice forming on my motorcycle. My wing mirrors, I have to get... There's condensation whereby there's dampness in the air that settles. And if it gets cold enough, that freezes. And it's kind of difficult riding with frozen wing mirrors and frozen dials. The headlight warms up, so that steams off, but the rest of it's kind of a bit cold. And on my old motorcycle, it didn't like cold starts. It didn't like the winter because everything just froze solid. Was just impossible to use. But no, I have noticed the last, I would say, week, 2 weeks, it has been getting cold very, very quickly. The temperature has dropped significantly. But again, because of the summer we've had, where we've had averaging over 30 degrees in the day, September was quite warm as well. August, not so much, but September was averaging over 25 degrees in the day at times. The sudden drop off in temperature in October has been stark, especially the last couple of weeks. It's got cold very, very quickly. It's not looking great now. I don't think there will be... I don't mind it. I don't mind the snow as much. I know how to adapt to the snow, be it riding in icy conditions because I've lived out in the Alps, or walking in the icy conditions. I don't mind the weather. I'm so surprised that so many people who go skiing in the winter to these ski resorts can't cope with the snow. It's amazing, considering that they have these winter sport enthusiasts. They can't cope when it snows here, but it does depend on what comes out the sky. The wetter the snow is, the worse it is for driving. The finer the snow is, it packs down differently and it reacts differently. It's the same when the Winter Olympics were on beginning of the year. There were issues with the snow not being right when it was snowing in Korea. It was more the damp, slushy snow coming out the sky, and that's not so good for skiing and snowboarding and bobsledding and generally doing winter activities. Whereas if it was more fine or dry snow, and it's weird, the science behind it, how it's formed in the clouds and how the atmosphere and how the temperature and the pressure has an effect. If it's not, I wouldn't say fine, but if it's more dry snow, in the sense that the air's dry, there's not much moisture in the air because it has frozen completely solid, that is the best snow. For drive, you can drive on it, you can walk on it, you can ski on it, you can do everything on it. All you got to do is just clear the roadways. It doesn't turn to slush as quickly. You can actually drive on it, ironically, and you can get around on it without any major issues. It's just, I think, where we are in the Northern Hemisphere and the general snow that comes out the sky, it's more the crappy shit that no one wants. But again, it's how you deal with it. But looking out that window right now, I'm not so keen on going out to my mates tonight. I'm not feeling as keen on going up 9 miles. The birds are staying in their perches; they're not flying around, which says to me it's very low pressure as well, because they're not really flying. You can tell what the weather's doing by what the animals are doing. They are very, very perceptive to the weather change. Weird though. I should do this on the other channel, really, shouldn't I? I'm not into horror films partly because they're not scary. Really, they're pretty. And the Halloween franchise. I mean, come on, how many times is he going to come back from the dead before it gets a bit dull? I know Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, and I know it's got good reviews, but he's that character has been used in so many films now in that franchise that how many more times can that character die? Jigsaw, yeah. I think my favourite film of, if we want to call it horror film, but I would more call it just a general bloodbath, is Battle Royale. Personally, Battle Royale is my favourite, and I would call that a bloodbath film, not really a horror film, because it's Battle Royale. Much like The Purge, it's just the old version of The Purge. But I'm not really a big fan of horror films because I think the genre is limited in what you can do with psychological thrillers and psychological horrors. I think are a bit better than the actual just gory death. Comedy horrors are funny, so like Scream and Scary Movie kind of things, they are kind of funny. I will give that, but I think the horror genre is right now. There is only so much you can put up with horror-wise. And I've seen some pretty scary things in real life as well. I almost got taken out by a deer the other night, riding back from my mate's house. When you're doing 60 mile an hour and you come around a blind corner and then there's a deer standing in the road who's just staring at you because it's deer in the headlights and you have to avoid it, that is probably more terrifying than a horror film. When a 60, 70 kilo, 80 kilo, fully grown female deer is standing in the road, that generally, if you hit that on a motorcycle, it's not going to be a good result for the motorcycle. A car hitting that, that's going to damage the car. You're going to still be alive. A motorcycle, that could be a fatal, you're done. So that was not the first time, and it's not the last time that I've almost hit a deer. I've had a few near misses with Bambi this year, and rabbits as well. I've had a lot of rabbits try and commit ritual suicide, as I call it, because the way I ride to my friend's house, there apparently is just an army of rabbits wanting to commit rabbit kamikaze. That is kind of scary when you're riding and Peter Rabbit comes out or Bugs Bunny flies out with I don't know, his bit on the side and his wife and whatever, and the kids, and they all shoot out, and you got a whole family of rabbits just charging across the road when you're doing about 60 mile an hour over a blind crest. It's not fun. It's not fun when it literally it's the rabbit version of Jihad, I think, because they obviously want to have their 72 bunny virgins. Wildlife jumping out when you're riding on a motorcycle is one of the more terrifying things that I've had, and I've had a few of them. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, depends if you watch the original or the remake. They are cult classics. I would say Battle Royale for me is my favourite gory film. Others may disagree. There's a load of comedy horrors that I find funny, like Dog Soldiers. I find really funny because it's so cheap, and it's such a cheap film that they made. But I find it kind of funny because it's a British film as well, and British humour. Like Doghouse, another great British comedy horror film. Shaun of the Dead, another great British comedy horror film. I like films like that. Especially when they're on a smaller budget, and you can tell that it really is down to the hard work of the actors, the writers, and the producers. Just to Zombieland, yes. Lesbian Vampire Killers, no. Lesbian Vampire Killers was James Corden. Fuck off! I can't stand him. He ruins everything he's in. I cannot stand him. He needs to just go away and stop trying to be funny because he's not funny. Zombieland, there are plans of a sequel because the way the film ends. There are plans to have a sequel to that. It would be nice to see a sequel to that. The plans for a sequel have been around for about 7 years now. We're just waiting for Woody Harrelson to stop being stoned enough to make the film. I would love to see Zombieland 2. That would be brilliant. Because Zombieland 1, I will tell you the Easter egg in it. There is an Easter egg in Zombieland 1. And the Easter egg is when they're in the supermarket kind of shop and he gets the banjo out and he hits the zombie over the head. If you look on the shelf behind him, there is a Twinkie. Just putting it out there. You can't find a Twinkie for the whole film. And the one place they find a Twinkie, they trash the shop and they destroy it. And it's in the shop they destroy in the middle of Arizona, I think. and he's got the banjo. And when he hits the zombie over the head with the banjo, if you look on the shelf behind him, there is a Twinkie. That is the Easter egg in Zombieland. So I have Zombieland somewhere in my film collection somewhere. I will have to dig it out and find it. I don't know where it's gone. It's in here somewhere in my film collection. I'm pissed off. If I've lost it, I'm going to be annoyed. If one of my so-called friends has stolen it, I will be furious. But I do have Zombieland in there somewhere. It is an epically funny film. But again, not everyone's cup of tea. I think the zombie genre of films, like Resident Evil, I think they weren't great. I've got a lot of them on DVD. They got worse as time went on. But it's interesting. We've gone from sport to vehicular death by animal and zombie films. It's amazing. This is why I love my live streams, because we can get so off topic and just keep discussing random crap. And you know, we've gone from me starting the live stream talking about Major League Baseball and the cost of redoing London City Stadium for the Major League Baseball next year, and the NFL games at Wembley destroying the pitch, to now we're on to The Walking Dead. This is why I have the second channel, and I don't know why I should live stream on the second channel more. That would be more fun. The Walking Dead, never got into it. I understand why people like The Walking Dead, but to keep going on for as many series as they have, when characters have to die, you're going to run out of ways to kill people off, surely. And how are you going to introduce new characters if The Walking Dead is surrounded by the undead? It gets a little bit like, how long can they keep that series going for? It's like Game of Thrones. They worked out, this is how many series we're going to do, this is how we're going to end it. They've worked that out. Fans are upset, but they've worked out how to decide to wind it down. Yes, we managed to get onto sailing. Obviously, you know, there is a limited amount of household names in sailing. Obviously, the America's Cup, you know, is the biggest event in sailing. And again, it's about Olympic sports. A lot of these minor sports that some people would see as a minor sport in some countries only get coverage when the Olympics is on, and that is a problem. And it's about how some of the more mainstream sports like football and rugby and to some extent ice hockey and cricket and things like that do have TV deals in place or do have dedicated fan bases, sponsors involved. They regularly live stream on YouTube. They regularly post their highlights on YouTube or other things like that. They regularly have, you know, they're regularly getting news articles. When a minor sport like sailing comes along, how does it break into that, get that coverage? And one of the ways it does it, you know, Ben Ainsley, also Ben Ainsley, sailing, winning. Apart from that, there's very limited and small coverage, and it's a shame because the UK has developed so many great sailing champions in the Olympic Games. We've got so many medals in the Olympics through sailing, and not just Ben Ainsley, but a lot of sailors. He just happens to be the best of the bunch. That it doesn't get the coverage it deserves. But again, how many people want to watch sailing? If I'm honest, how many people do want to watch sailing? Yes, Transworld Sport. Now we're going back to a channel that no longer exists. Yeah, Transworld Sport as a program, as a channel, it's going back some. Transworld, yes, they did cover a lot of random sports around the world, and a lot of niche sports and lesser covered leagues. But again, it's how many people are willing to support sailing, watch sailing, how many sponsors are willing to get in, how much investment can it get. It's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. There isn't a lot of money in it. You take out the America's Cup, there's not a lot of money in sailing. So yeah, there is a finite amount of money that is out there from sponsors and investors. There is a finite amount of money in the world. It doesn't go on forever. But again, it comes down to when we talk about Olympic funding. Sports since post 2012, the Olympic legacy that we're meant to have, how much of that legacy is actually there, because British Olympic funding has been under the spotlight for the last 6 years, since the 2012 Olympics, and building up to that Olympics from 2008. Olympic funding was regularly, in the spotlight, and it's more so now with some of the allegations that have come out about the culture within the Olympic movement in the UK and some of the governing bodies of sports in the UK. It doesn't matter if they're fully professional or they're semi-pro, or they're Olympic or whatever it is. So, you know, there is that there. Speedboat racing is kind of big. And they do get a lot of it's because it's classed as motorsport. Motorsport itself does have a lot of money sloshing around in it, but when it comes to kayaking, canoeing, rowing gets a bit more coverage on the World Championships and European Championships. So rowing has got a good club system and a good funding system. But when it comes to kayaking, rafting, and sailing, there is an issue there, and that comes down again to Olympic funding, and getting young people interested in doing it. That's another thing. We have less and less people using the sea as a job, so fishermen and sailing boats going out to harbour. We have less people involved in the fishing industry. We have less people involved in boat building. We have less. So again, it comes down to getting people involved in, firstly, general sailing and general boating and general water sport based industry, and the support industries to that, and getting kids involved as well, because sailing is a more expensive sport than some people realise, and it's not necessarily the safest activity because you can drown. Yes, Solo Man needs to make a reference to this kayak. I have heard reference to the kayak ad. You are showing your age there. I think the average age of this live stream has gone up to 110. No, yes, advertising campaigns do help. So if you can get people like Sir Ben Aisley to be on an advertising campaign, that may seriously help the exposure of the sport. The fact that he does the America's Cup regularly when that's on, yes, that helps the exposure of the sport. The round the world sailing competitions, such as what's her name, the female did it, Ellen MacArthur, that raised the profile of sailing at that time. But then we've had other attempts to go around the world or yacht sailing on long distance yacht thing, and yeah, the professional fishing tournaments, yeah, that was a thing. He did come out and he worked, I think, with the Daily Mirror, I think was the newspaper, and he had it on the angling TV or something, a fishing channel or Discovery Channel. Barry Hearn, yeah, he's a very big fan of fishing. He likes competition fishing. He finds it therapeutic since he's had his heart attacks and stuff. He did. Come up with the professional British fishing tournaments. I'm not so sure if the Angling Times is that much of a popular publication, but yes, Barry Hearn did put a lot of effort into promoting competition fishing. There is a reasonable fan base and reasonable participation for competition fishing as an outdoor activity. But then again, you've got these left wing loony animal rights activists who think it's wrong. Sport fishing, but they seriously need to sod off because it's such a regulated activity. You've got to have a fishing license. You've got to use certain baits. You've got to take certain weights. Otherwise, you have to do safe release. All this bollocks. They don't look at the regulation, but the left wing, loony, tree hugger, anytime there's animals involved, horse racing, greyhound racing, they come out and bang their pathetic drum because they are miseducated. They don't fully understand there is a lot of regulation in place to protect the wildlife or the animals involved in horse racing and greyhound racing, and they're completely out of touch with actually what the sport actually is. But that's my view on the loony left, as I call them. I don't know, the rubbish right as well. I've really got off. I really hate politics with a passion. I think the right are raving loonies and the left are literal loonies. I think politics at the moment and then some of these pressure groups are completely cuckoo. But yeah, Barry Hearn, yes, he did in the 90s really push the professional fishing tournaments. But again, very niche sport, very limited in the appeal to a lot of young people. It's very, very niche, that is. It comes down to less people living in rural areas where there's rural waterways. And yes, he has got stakes in snooker and darts. I'm not going to do Tommy Robinson. I refuse to go down and discuss twats like him. But he doesn't deserve the airspace. He doesn't. I've had people on before I set up the other channel discuss Donald Trump on here and ask about Donald Trump questions. I think politics has become so toxic right now that it's something that people like him don't deserve the airtime or being discussed about because because they're so bigoted and they're so blinkered, they don't fully understand the culture behind the Islamic world. He couldn't tell the difference between a Sunni and a Shiite if you put them in front of him. He couldn't tell the difference between the different sects of Islam, much the difference as he can't tell the difference between a Catholic church and a Protestant church from the outside. The guy is so ignorant, it's painful. And there's a lot of ignorant people on Twitter who follow him. Oh yeah, people do post things. I'll finish on my thought on Barry Hearn's contribution to licensed sports such as boxing, snooker, darts, and fishing. Snooker and 8-ball pool. Yes, the cue sports, they did need a freshening up. They were not attracting the fans that they could do. Now the sport is in a much healthier financial position. There are more registered players. There is more interest. The fact that ITV's got a lot of the rights now, BBC's losing some of the rights, Sky's got in there, that is a concern. But at the same time, he has freshened up a sport that was going stale. Darts is losing its appeal rapidly. It's just for middle-aged pissheads to shout way a lot and dress up like twats. Darts has gone down the toilet. But snooker has filled that gap. And more young players are coming. A lot of young players from both the UK and around the world are playing. We're seeing the reach of the sport go outside the UK, outside of the traditional market, to places like Brazil. There are Brazilian players in the top 100 in the world. A lot of Chinese players. There's a lot of players. We've got Australians now at the top level of the game, which is great. And in darts as well, we've got Australians at the top of darts and snooker. If it can crack the North American market, it's in a good place. It's in a good place now, but it needs to crack the North American market. And because their North American pool is different to English pool, they don't quite get the fact that you have to be a bit more skilled to put the ball in the pocket. Boxing's got problems. His son's doing a lot more of the promotion side of things now. And some of the boxers he's promoting, I think are very distasteful individuals outside the ring. Boxing has an issue with drugs at the moment and issues. Much like UFC and MMA, there are issues with drugs testing for steroids and recreational drug use. We've seen that with Tyson Fury. We've seen it with the criminality that some of these boxers get involved in as well. So boxing, I think they need to get rid of the pay-per-view kind of thing and just make it more free to air. Channel 5 in the UK has done that very, very well. I think other channels could take a leaf. ITV, I don't get the ITV box office. No one wants it. ITV is a free to air network. Why are they bringing in a paywall? Because that puts people off. But no, he's definitely reinvented snooker and done wonders for snooker. There were some more conservative, old school snooker fans who didn't want it. They're a minority. The sport needed to evolve. It needed to become more relevant. It has done so. There are some downsides to it, yes. The latest venue where they were playing with Ronnie O'Sullivan said it reeked of piss and was crap and was not up to standard. That is, again, one player. Yes, the David Hay, Dave and Spike, yes, they're getting some boxing. There will be more boxing on Dave and Spike. They've worked out their target audience very, very well. It's the boxers they have on these programs. They're not the top level yet. They're trying to work their way up to the top rung of the sport. So they are getting some good exposure. But boxing as a sport does have an issue long term. Teddy Lowe, the commentator, that is going back a long while ago. But yeah, no, Barry Hearn's contribution to licensed sports has been positive. There have been some negatives along the way as well. The reliance on betting companies to sponsor events, that has been highlighted, especially snooker, that reliance on the betting firms to come in has been criticised by some, especially with match fixing allegations against players within snooker, and Stuart Bingham getting done for betting offences, and Stephen Lee being banned for life pretty much, 10-year ban, but basically banned for life. The reliance on betting firms for sponsorship has been a concern, but that's what Barry Hearn and his son and their promotional company could get to sponsor tournaments. That was one of the few things they could get. There are other sponsors out there, but they were able. They needed sponsorship. They needed companies to sponsor. The betting companies came forward and said, "We'll do that." But that is a criticism of a lot of Barry Hearn and the licensed sports side of it is the reliance on betting firms to. Again, the reason why gambling and alcohol are taking up a lot of the betting rights to some of these sports and some of these events is because of the ban on tobacco sponsorship. They didn't get things like car companies or insurance companies or supermarkets. They went for what the fan base would use, which was fags and alcohol and gambling. This is the issue with some of these licensed sports is a lot of the fan base, a lot of their disposable income goes on these things. So they've also gone down, let's target the fan base more with what the fan base wants. There is an issue with gambling and sports and the sponsorship, and it's a big concern. Match fixing in snooker is there. It is a concern. It's not a new thing. Players have been caught out for it and accused of it. So there are those issues within the sport. But yeah, alcohol and gambling companies sponsoring a Barry Hearn events. Nothing new. Same with most sports now. There is a lot of gambling sponsorship in there. They're trying to ban like the e-cig companies from sponsoring sport as well. I find that rich considering they took tobacco money for 30 years and took a lot of tobacco's money for 30 years, and that's why sport survived in the 80s was the tobacco money. But I do think if you're going to ban tobacco advertising, you should ban gambling and alcohol advertising on sport. Personal opinion, a lot of people disagree with that. But if you want to tackle some of society's ills, yes, tobacco is legal. Yes, alcohol is legal. Yes, gambling is legal, and it's legalized. It's strictly regulated. But I think they need to possibly limit or reduce the amount of ads, or even ban them for sport altogether. I'm not saying ban the adverts, but ban them from sponsoring sports events because there is an issue with gambling addiction and alcohol and other drug-related addiction in sports. Doesn't matter what sport it is. There is a massive issue with alcoholism. There's a massive issue with narcotic abuse, recreational drug misuse, and illegal steroids. And there is an issue with gambling. I just watch my mental health awareness video in sport back from Valentine's Day. In the player welfare playlist that I have, basically I list off a whole host of sports stars. Some of them are household names, some of them are lesser well known, but I list off just about 30 names in there, and it's shocking. And I think that I did that video just after Paul Gascoigne was in the news again for some health-related issue, and I listed off a shed load of names. It doesn't get the views it deserves. That deserves hundreds, if not thousands of views. It's getting less than that, but it's still getting watched. People are still watching it. People are still engaging with it. And yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's again, the darts wouldn't survive without the sponsorship of these sponsors. It is a concern that they can't find better sponsors or non-alcohol, non-betting companies, but that's what the fan base of darts, they spend a lot of their income on is gambling and alcohol. It's a known thing. So Barry Hearn has been smart in the sense that to keep fans on board, give the fans what they want, which is what they want to spend their money on betting. They want to spend their money on alcohol. But darts itself does have a culture problem, and it is an alcohol and betting problem. And the fact that snooker's reliant on this money as well is concerning. There are concerns that I have with betting. Not alcohol, not so much, because alcohol advertising has been around for donkey's years, but betting ads are a new thing, and they're very, very bright lights, and they're target. And gambling is probably more addictive than alcohol, even though alcohol is probably one of the most addictive substances man has ever created. Gambling is more seen as a criminal kind of thing as well. There's links to the criminal underworld with unlicensed gambling and match fixing and betting scandals. I have my concerns there. Right, on that point, we've been going for 3 hours and 20 minutes, and we've discussed a lot of random stuff that isn't sport related, but now we are ending up on a sports related thing. No. I'm sweet enough. Do I take sugar? No, Turkish. I'm sweet enough. Um, we've ended on a point that I think is a good point to end on, and that is where does the sports sponsorship come from? And the rise of these online betting firms. There's hundreds of them now. My old Blackburn shirt has got a Bet24. They're still going. They're a not so reputable betting company these days. That was 12 years ago we had that sponsor. So the last decade and a half has seen a massive rise in gambling sponsorship as tobacco sponsorship died off and was banned. Betting's got in there. Alco has always been there. Carlsberg used to sponsor Liverpool back in the day in the 90s, and then going back in the 80s, you had various sponsors. The Champions League is sponsored by Heineken. The rugby is sponsored by Heineken. Alco sponsorship's been there for a long time, and the only poor bookie is a bad bookie. A good bookie is a wealthy bookie. There's always money in gambling. It is strictly regulated, yes, but now with gambling being fully legalized across the US, we'll see what happens with the gambling industry going forward, because obviously there are plans in the government and in the opposition parties here in the UK to be stricter on gambling law and what you can have in a gaming shop and a betting shop. But now they see the US market and they're going to make a lot of money. So it's also about jobs as well. There's a lot of people who work for these betting companies who've got jobs, whether they are well paid or not. If you are going to start hammering the betting companies, that could put people out of work. And that's something that looks bad for the figures if you put companies out of work. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to end that there. That's a good point to end on, is there'll never be a poor bookie. There is. It's called a dead bookie because he's pissed off the mafia and hasn't paid the protection money and has been kneecapped. Oh, yes. I know how the mafia work. Yeah, we had no trolls because I did it in the daytime, which was nice. I decided to change the time of day I did it. I had a bit of free time on my hands. The weather isn't looking great. I am going out to see my mate tonight, so again, wouldn't have time tonight. I was going to do a video on my views on the NFL in the London series and the Major League Baseball London series. They can wait till tomorrow because then I can actually really do more research on that and how, how much money the NFL makes on the London series. The fact they actually had a record crowd for their last game, even though the game was pretty poor quality, if I'm honest. I watched most of it. It was not actually great quality. But there we go. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate all your comments. We had some really interesting discussions about a lot of non-sport related stuff. And first troll of the day, right at the end, we get a troll as I'm ending. So, okay. And okay, you can we're gonna bye bye. Oh, we had a troll right at the end. Just as I was ending the stream, a troll turned up. Bless. Bless the Trump. Bless the right wing loons. But there we go. Cheers, guys. We had to get a troll at some point, and actually, to be fair, some of the crap he was saying was hilarious because he's a lunatic. Yeah, he has. He's blocked now. It happens. They just change the name slightly. They try. Yeah, it's hilarious how. I'll give them that. I'll give them that they're persistent. But some of them seriously are mentally retarded. I swear they have some mental issues. And it's not funny talking about mental issues. It's kind of serious because I have had mental health problems myself, but they need help because it's just attention seeking. But there we go. I'm going to end that there. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I appreciate all your comments. We've discussed some non-sport stuff as well. It was really interesting. We got some social and political stuff, which links into sport, ironically. This is where sport is a good conduit. Appreciate all your questions and all your comments and the discussion we've had. Thank you very much from all around the world. I appreciate, and I shall see you guys soon.